In a universe not so far away, the whole world was throwing a massive party to celebrate kicking out the baddest villain around. People were swarming in from everywhere to cheer on the hero who finally took down the big bad demon king, bringing peace to the land. No more monster trouble, no more innocent folks getting caught in the crossfire. After centuries of chaos, this fantasy realm of isekai was finally chilling out in an era of peace. In a narrow alley, two kids dashed toward the hero's victory celebration. The boy nudged his sister, urging her to hurry before they missed anything. It was a once-in-a-lifetime chance they couldn't afford to miss. As they raced forward, the boy suddenly halted, frozen in place by a mysterious figure cloaked in darkness. His sister caught up, puzzled by her brother's sudden stillness, and followed his gaze to the enigmatic robed figure. She couldn't figure out why the man was walking in the opposite direction of the hero's parade, and her brother, fearing they might draw unwanted attention, nervously told her to look away. The boy recognized the figure as a dark magician, a sinister type of mage who dabbled in dark powers. His sister didn't grasp the seriousness of it, but her brother explained that being a dark magician meant being cursed. The man in dark robes, carrying a white sack on his shoulder, walked a lonely road towards the cathedral, where the saint of this era awaited him. She was gazing out, thinking about the peace that had finally come to the world, when she heard a knock on the door. Turning, she saw the robed figure standing at the entrance. Her golden hair symbolized her divine powers, and her white robe signified her purity. She looked at the man and welcomed him back. In stark contrast, his dark clothes and silent presence exuded nothing but sinister vibes. If the saint was a being of pure light, the robed man was the incarnation of darkness. His name is Minjun, and when he unpacks the sack, revealing the head of the Demon King, it becomes clear that he was the true hero all along. Due to the dark nature of his powers, he had to remain in the shadows while a useless man in fancy armor took all the glory. The saint, speaking on behalf of the empire, begins to thank the dark magician, but he cuts her off. Minjun declares that he did everything that was asked of him, and now wants the saint to fulfill her end of the promise. With a grim expression, the saint assures him that she remembers her promise and will fulfill it. She then suggests that, given the circumstances, she should refer to the dark magician not as Minjun but as Minjun, his original name before he was forcefully summoned to this world. Standing under the statue of the goddess, the saint tries to have a heart-to-heart discussion with the protagonist. She tells him that she's sorry he had to bear such a heavy responsibility and explains that she didn't give him such a job because she hated him. In fact, she will forever be in his debt, but the man replies coldly that he hates her so much he could die right now. Unfazed, the saint promises to do everything in her power to change people's opinions about dark mages in this world. She begs him to reconsider his wish to go back to his old world. But Minjun, firm in his resolve, replies that there is nothing to consider. He has already been used enough, and now he simply wishes to return to his world in one piece. She sighs and says that if he stays for the sake of the empire, she promises he will be rewarded for all the ill treatment he has endured and more. But it seems she's too late. The dark magician tells her to stop acting. The saint protests, insisting she's sincere, but the protagonist replies that there's nothing she can give him. The saint's eyes widen in surprise. As the god's chosen, she holds considerable power, so what could he possibly desire that she cannot provide? He responds that he was brought here by force, used like a slave, and now she wants him to stay behind to serve her even more. He asks if this is really what she thinks he deserves in return for forsaking his own life. She responds that she can grant whatever he desires because, without him, the empire's peace might not last long. But the protagonist insists on his first wish. He wants to eat Korean fried chicken. The saint looks puzzled, not knowing what it is. He asks for kimchi, but again, the saint is clueless. He complains about the disgusting food in this world, how he's been eating nothing but high-calorie biscuits all these years. How can he be expected to stay in a world where he's forced to eat such trash? If he can't be provided with good food, can the saint at least get him a gaming PC and a good internet connection? Of course, none of that is possible in this underdeveloped world. The saint clenches her fists, realizing she can't provide any of the things he longs for. She gives up on keeping him in this world, acknowledging that he never belonged here in the first place. She drops her head in defeat and agrees to start the return ceremony immediately. She leads him to the summoning chamber, where the protagonist reminisces about his past, remembering when he was first summoned and feeling relieved that he will never have to see this place again. The saint tells him to stand in the summoning circle in the center and begins the return ceremony. Magical patterns start moving under his feet. She informs him that she will begin by removing the protection of the saint from his body. Minjun takes off his glove and looks at the hand with the saint's symbol on it. Even though it's called protection, it's just a leash that prevents the summoned person from fighting the saint. He's glad to finally be rid of it. The saint holds out her hands, and a radiant light purifies the symbol from his hand. She seems perplexed, not only because the Dark Magician is giving up all the incredible power he built up over the years, but also because he's refusing to take all the riches and fame he would receive by staying here. But the man, fed up with this world, asks the saint to mind her own business. Instead, he asks why she isn't concerned about this situation. Once the symbol is completely gone, he could kill her if he wanted to. The woman replies that she knows she is the root cause of all the hatred in his heart. If he were to kill her, she would gladly accept her death. Now that the protection is undone, she tells him he can kill her if he wishes. If he has no such desire, she would like to proceed to the next stage of the ceremony. The next step involves removing the powers the protagonist has obtained in the world of Isgard. The saint steps back from the circle to complete this process, but this is where things won't go as she planned. Instead, it goes according to the Dark Magician's plan. He quickly hurls a rope of binding dark energy to subdue the saint and hold her up in the air. She tells him that possessing the powers of this world will kill him if he uses the dimensional gate, warning him that what he's doing is complete nonsense. But this man worked himself to death to obtain these powers, and there's no way he will leave them behind. Dropping the saint unceremoniously on her rear, he proceeds to open the dimensional gate himself. Though her life was spared, the saint is more concerned that the Dark Magician will never be able to open the dimensional gate with his unholy powers and will probably die as a result. However, her worries prove unwarranted as the protagonist stands before a fully functioning portal. Despite this, the saint warns him that he's risking his life by attempting to travel between dimensions so rashly. He acknowledges the risk, explaining that he practiced his magic thousands of times to perfect it. He's confused why the people of this world divide magic into light and darkness in the first place. When he reached the peak, he realized all magic is the same anyway. Before stepping through the portal, he puts his hand in his pocket and says there's something he'd like to give the saint before he leaves. She looks on, curious and wary, but it's just a fist, which he tells her to shove up her ass. With that parting shot, he steps into the portal, knowing he will never have to see this stupid world ever again. She shouts for the protagonist to stop before the portal destabilizes and kills the caster, but it's already too late. The summoning chamber is soon filled with waves of bright purple energy. The portal collapses in on itself and vanishes into thin air, leaving the saint alone in the chamber. She slams her fist on the floor in anger. Despite their differences, she's upset that things ended this way. She never wanted to make anyone suffer and never enjoyed putting the protagonist through all that hardship. But now, none of that matters, as the two of them are worlds apart. In an unassuming building on Earth, purple lightning sparks, and Minjun is teleported inside. Finally, he's back on the planet he was taken from. Though he acted confidently, he felt like he was going to die during the dimensional travel, but now, it's all over. He stands in the same room he was summoned from and sees his phone still charging on the table. The sensation of having his phone in his hand is indescribable, and he realizes how much he missed it. His favorite game, Dungeon Power Fighter, is still installed. When he opens the game, the reality of his successful return to Earth kicks in, and he can't help but laugh maniacally. He's finally home. But it's too soon to be happy. For some reason, there's no internet connectivity in his apartment, and outside, a squad of soldiers is hugging the walls as if they're in a war zone. The unit commander asks if they're headed in the right direction, and the scout confirms they are on the path relayed by the radio location. The commander asks his corporal why regular soldiers like them were dispatched to deal with something so dangerous. The corporal is just as confused, saying such questions should be directed to headquarters. With no other choice, the soldiers take a deep breath and prepare for battle. On the corporal's signal, they rush to the road and turn the corner to engage the enemy. But what they see is completely different from what they expected. Kim is walking the streets, annoyed that his phone has no network connection and that not a single store is open, despite it being the middle of the day. The soldiers are confused to see a civilian in a restricted area and shout for the young men to come back to them. Minjun is also surprised to see armed soldiers. He wonders what the army is doing in a civilian area and assumes they're conducting training drills, apologizing for getting in the way. That's when the soldiers notice something behind him and shout for him to run away as fast as he can. When he turns around to see what has the soldiers so flustered, he couldn't be more confused by the bizarre sight before him. A huge wolf-like monster is leaping at him, ready to rip him apart with its claws. But Minjun isn't surprised by the monster. He's surprised that something so weak-looking could have the soldiers so scared. After all, he just came from a world where he fought much stronger monsters for years. When he clenches his fist to summon his dark powers, the demonic energy fails to manifest. It's completely gone. Not that it really matters in this case, since Minjun is able to crush such small fry with his sheer strength. He has no trouble burying the wolf monster's face in the ground. The soldiers stand in awe, realizing they've underestimated the civilian in their midst. The soldiers are stunned silently by this superhuman display of power, and the monster's teeth break off completely from the force of the impact. The fact that it dared to attack him still pisses Minjun off, and he brutally crushed the monster's skull with his bare hands. Even though he can't use his dark magic due to a lack of demon energy, he's still strong enough to handle such monsters. After all, he went through hellish strength training every day in Isgard. He recognizes the creature's identity but wonders why it has appeared in this world. With many questions swirling in his mind, he turns to the soldiers behind him, who might have some answers. But when he calls for their attention, the soldiers are so scared that they can barely speak. After some time, the soldiers take the protagonist into an army vehicle to escort him out of the restricted area. The corporal warns him that he was wandering too far into a monster-infested area. Under normal circumstances, he could have been arrested, but since the commander told them not to escalate the situation, they're just letting him go. How is it possible that you really don't know about anything that's happening in the world? The corporal asks, his voice tinged with suspicion. Minjun simply lies, saying he had been living abroad. Regardless, this isn't the Korea he used to know. He recalls that the phenomenon of dungeons appeared when he was around 7 years old, when monsters from dungeons started appearing in real life. He remembers the soldiers and the military beating them up, much like now. With the appearance of dungeons, superhumans called the Awakened started appearing, possessing abilities that surpassed average humans. They joined the Hunter Corps, which was newly established at the military base, and completely wiped out the monsters as soon as they appeared. Prior to being summoned by the Saint, Korea had no danger of being harmed in civilian areas. But now, there's an even bigger problem due to the current chaotic state of the world. Is it possible that the Dungeon Power Fighters servers are completely gone? If that happened, then Minjun wonders what the point of coming back to Earth was in the first place. The corporal can't help but be suspicious of Minjun's behavior. The world is in a state of chaos, so how is it possible that he doesn't know about anything simply because he was living abroad? But then again, he doesn't have the guts to ask questions that don't concern him. He already witnessed the protagonist's strength firsthand. Kim Minjun calls for the corporal's attention and asks, did people evacuate safely during the crisis, especially people like game developers? Is it possible to get a job in this day and age, especially in a game company? What about the destruction of buildings? Are places like the server storage systems okay? It looks like his needle is stuck on the game, and he needs some answers. The corporal sighs and replies, all right, I'll explain everything from the start. The corporal explains that the situation deteriorated because of a weird phenomenon that started spreading from the dungeons 2 years ago. One day, the dungeons began to appear much more frequently and started getting larger. The biggest problem, however, was the increasing number of giant monsters emerging from these strange dungeons. Because of that, the military couldn't control the dungeons anymore, and the situation escalated to the point of locking down some civilian areas. Since then, the military has been trying different methods to fight back but lacks the necessary numbers. Minjun is extremely disappointed to hear this explanation. He doesn't care about such matters. The only thing he wants to know is whether the game companies are doing all right because he wants to play Dungeon Power Fighter. The corporal, noticing Minjun's lack of concern for the world situation, asks him how old he is. Minjun replies that he's probably 21 this year. The corporal suggests that he should enlist in the military soon, considering that half of his 20s are about to evaporate into thin air. Minjun doesn't understand. The mandatory military service used to be 5 years for the Hunter Corps and 3 years for regular troops. So, why would he need to waste half of his 20s? The corporal explains that since the situation has worsened in recent years, all troops now serve for 5 years, not just the Hunter Corps. If Minjun is 21, he probably has his enlistment letter ready. Minjun is disappointed. He came back so he could live the rest of his life in easy mode and play his favorite games, but now he has to serve in the military for 5 years, and he's furious that he didn't even get to connect with the game servers yet. That's when his phone finally receives some network, and he gets a message from the military, an enlistment date notice to join the X Division, and the enlistment date is tomorrow. The timing couldn't be more uncanny, so Minjun assumes this is probably some spam message, but the corporal assures him that it's real and not spam. Minjun is shocked. How can the military enlist people without even a physical examination? And how does it make sense to notify you only 1 day before enlisting? The corporal explains that the military is extremely short on manpower, and such practices have become very normal. He suggests Minjun go to the internet cafe close to the evacuation center and double-check his status himself. The mention of the PC cafe fills Minjun with new life. When his parents went missing, he just holed himself up in his house and played games, but then he was summoned to Isgard when he was in grade 12 without even a single friend. After years of hell, he gets to experience the forgotten paradise of humanity, an internet cafe where the servers of his favorite games still live, and he can play to his heart's content. As he wastes away hours in this haven, he keeps ordering all the fast food he missed eating in his previous world. Even the waitress is shocked by how much he can eat. Now that his need to play games has been satisfied, reality starts hitting him. He checks the internet news articles, and everything the corporal said was true, including the enlistment date. The text message had said the due date was tomorrow. If he had possessed all of his powers from Isgard, he would have been able to clear every single dungeon by himself. But for some reason, his body is completely depleted of the demon energy that is the main source of his dark magic. Despite this, he is confident that he can still clear all the dungeons by himself. After thinking about it for a few minutes, he shouts out loud with newfound resolve, "If it means saving my favorite games from getting wiped out, then bring it on." Minjun is resolved to handle everything on his own. The next day, he arrives at the enlistment center as instructed and is surprised to see a large crowd. Some are saying farewell to their families, and others to their lovers, all with somber expressions. Minjun finds this amusing and can't help but chuckle at their misery. The announcer calls for all soldiers to report to the auditorium immediately. It is unlikely that Minjun's military training will be as intense as what he went through in Isgard. Commanders are screaming and swearing at the new recruits to stand up straight and show discipline while putting F-bombs in every sentence inside the auditorium. This harsh treatment even before training begins shocks the recruits, but Minjun is unfazed, considering these insignificant insults ridiculous in comparison to his Asgardian Spartan teachers. The battalion commander steps to the podium and calls for everyone's attention. He asks the new recruits to raise their hands if they want to apply to the Hunter Corps and haven't had the chance yet. He incentivizes the recruits by mentioning the Hunter Corps receives better treatment and a much higher base pay. Despite this, No one raises their hand, intimidated by the idea of tougher training. The commander informs the recruits that this is just a formality and there's no need to be nervous. However, one person does raise his hand, Kim Minjun. The commander asks the volunteer to step forward immediately. Eager to make an impression, Minjun pushes against the ground with such force that the floor cracks. He jumps high into the air, flying well above everyone's heads, and lands majestically on top of the podium. The battalion commander is stunned, looking at him with immense surprise. Minjun introduces himself confidently. "I'm Recruit Kim Minjun, and I'd like to apply to the Hunter Corps." The entire auditorium falls silent, all eyes on this extraordinary recruit who just made an entrance like no other. The story continues in the northern regions of Isgard. Picture this, the dark and desolate mountainous area, full of rocky cliffs and lifeless dust. It's a place so empty, even tumbleweeds get lonely. This forsaken land is known as the Forgotten Canyon. Inside a deep, dark cave, a shining beacon of light appears. We hear a voice, our protagonist, Kim Minjun, muttering about his Dark Mage job. Spoiler alert, he's not thrilled. "This Dark Mage gig is endless turmoil," he says, sitting atop a giant, lifeless spider's head like it's a comfy beanbag chair. "Yeah, it's that kind of story." Kim goes on a little rant. "Even with insane skills, if we run out of demonic energy, it's all for nothing." And he's right. Dark mages rely heavily on demonic energy, which is their version of mana. But unlike regular mages, it doesn't just restore itself. Nope, for dark mages, it's a constant grind. He thinks about the White Wizard. You know the type, always calm, always full of mana, probably drinks herbal tea. The White Wizard's motto is "Mana is always within you. Just call it, select it, and collect it." But dark mages, no such luck. To replenish their demonic energy, they have to kill monsters and drain them. Not exactly a sustainable lifestyle choice. Our hero is coming to some tough realizations. His dark mage image means he'll never find any party members. It's a solo act, folks, and if he runs out of demonic energy in a dungeon, well, let's just say it won't be a happy ending. But wait, why is he smiling and in such a good mood? Sitting by a bonfire, he asks the big question: what's the best method for a dark mage to restore and retain demonic energy? As Kim Minjun sits atop one of the 50 giant, lifeless spiders he's slain, green goo and gaping holes now decorating the cave floor, he hears a menacing thump behind him. Turning cautiously, he spots the Forgotten Canyon hidden dungeon boss, Arachnus, a colossal spider with red, bulbous eyes and razor-sharp claws, glaring at him. Kim tries to chat up the beast, but Arachnus isn't in the mood for small talk. With a deafening roar, it lunges at him. But Kim, confident as ever, swiftly pierces through its thick skin and beheads it in a single, calculated strike. Having answered his earlier question about demonic energy restoration, Kim reflects on his recent triumph over the Spider Queen and her brood. Cut to the present, where Kim and June enjoy a quiet moment, sipping coffee in a familiar setting. A voice interrupts. "Your name is Kim Minjun." Kim nods, surprised by the military uniform. The officer informs him that a Hunter Corps team is on its way. Grateful for the coffee brewed by the battalion commander himself, Kim settles in as they exchange banter. "Why join the Hunter Corps?" asks the officer, curious about Kim's motives amid turbulent times. Kim's response: "Business in the dungeons," draws laughter. The officer, charmed by Kim's wit, jokes about forgiving Kim's previous mishap with the auditorium flooring. Here, we learn that in Korea, dungeons are managed by the Army's elite Hunter Corps. Kim seeks entry to challenge dungeons solo, hoping to regain his powers. His ambitious plan includes advancing through ranks, clearing dungeons, and becoming a revered hero. Sergeant Lucino enters the room, giving a commanding salute. The battalion commander introduces the sergeant to Kim Minjun, who instantly feels a wave of irritation at the sergeant's sheer energy. "Do you really have hunter abilities? Can you open a status window?" Lucino asks, practically buzzing with excitement. Kim sighs, thinking, what's wrong with this guy? He mutters about the Hunter Corps being frustrating, but obliges. He opens his status window, expecting to see his familiar stats from Isgard. Instead, His face contorts in shock. The status window displays an error message. The twitchy sergeant keeps pestering him. "What do you see? What's on the window?" Frustrated, Kim responds, "It says error. I've never seen anything like this before." Meanwhile, at the Hunter Corps Training Center, a conversation unfolds in the battalion commander's office. "It's been a long time, 10 years, if I'm not mistaken," the battalion commander says, motioning for the visitor to sit. Hunter Sanyumko stands tall, her eyes meeting the battalion commander's. "I'm not a hunter. I'm just a recruit like everyone else," she insists, wary of any special treatment due to her father. The battalion commander reassures her, "You were called here for a different reason. Hunter's Corps is tough. No one gets special treatment." Still puzzled, Sun Yumko asks, "Then why was I summoned?" The battalion commander smiles, "You're a renowned rookie. As the training commander, I'm interested in promising new recruits. I just wanted to give you a few words of encouragement before you begin your training." He thanks her for enlisting as a soldier rather than an executive, acknowledging that someone with her skills is invaluable in the field. "We always need skilled and committed individuals like you. Thank you, both as a citizen of Korea and as a soldier." Sun Yumko blushes slightly, thanking him for his kind words. The commander glances out the window, spotting a truck pulling up, reminding him of Minjun. "You might be getting a rather interesting comrade on your team soon," he says, intrigued. "Let's go pay him a visit." Minjun arrives at the Hunter Corps Training Center with Sergeant Lee and is immediately struck by the building's sheer beauty. The towering structure, with its countless floors and gleaming glass facade, shines brighter than the sun. Minjun is astounded by the extravagance and can't help but wonder how much taxpayer money was poured into it. He even jokes to himself about whether there's a PC room inside. Sergeant Lee, ever the realist, quickly grounds him. "Don't get too excited. Your recruitment hasn't been confirmed yet because of the error with your status window." Lee's tone is clear, he's not a fan. "Since you're a special case, you'll be tested personally by me. And trust me, if it were up to me, I'd send you to the military police right away." Minjun senses the jealousy in Lee's voice and wonders why he's so stingy about everything. "What's the test?" he asks, curious. Lee points towards a large, crystallized red rock. "This is redstone, a byproduct of the dungeons. It's extremely hard, dense, and heavy. Most recruits can't budget an inch. If you can move it, you'll pass the test." A smile spreads across Minjun's face. "Is that all?" he exclaims, finding the test too simple. Lee's demeanor changes, realizing that Minjun might not be as daft as he seems. He thinks to himself about the status window error and how there have always been liars trying to get into the Hunter Corps with mediocre abilities. Despite Minjun jumping 5 meters to the podium, Lee is almost certain he's a liar. From a distance, on a balcony overlooking the testing room, the training commander brings Hunter Sun Yumko to watch Minjun's test. Apparently, he showcased incredible physical abilities at the recruit training center, but his status window shows an error, the commander explains. "In all my years, I've never seen such a case. I have high hopes for Kim and want to see how unique he truly is." Minjun stands near the redstone, hand placed on its surface. This ridiculously heavy redstone that was all over the Isgard dungeons. "This size, I can easily push it away," he thinks. Leaning forward, he pulls his arm back, fist clenched, revving up a punch that he hopes will move the redstone or maybe even has some demonic energy inside it. Sergeant Lee and Hunter Sun Yumko watch intently, wondering what Minjun is about to do. With a swift strike, him lands a punch right at the center of the rock. But it doesn't just move, it completely shatters. As the dust settles, a large hole is revealed where the redstone once stood. The spectators are stunned, mouths agape in shock. There is no demonic energy inside the redstone. Minjun had managed to obliterate it with sheer power. Even Minjun is taken aback by his own strength. "What a monstrous bastard," Sergeant Lee thinks, utterly shocked by Minjun's prowess. The first day of training begins. Recruit Nam, Hayek, and the rest of the recruits struggle as they run up the stairs. Hayek's thoughts are scattered due to fatigue. "Even before enlisting in the Hunter Corps, I knew the training wouldn't be ordinary," he thinks, desperately trying to keep his strength while climbing the infamous 6,000 steps. The recruits are weighed down with sandbags from the very first session. Sergeant Lee Sumo, the devil instructor, checks their finishing times, constantly hassling them. Hayek realizes that even after such grueling training, stats only increase slightly before recruits are placed directly into battle. I have to endure this because I'm a Hunter Corps recruit, Hayek thinks, until he sees Minjun, and like the others, Minjun is having the time of his life. He feels light on his feet. If he had all his demonic energy, he'd be flying. Compared to his dungeon-dwelling days in Isgard, this training is a breeze. The military uniform suits his style, and he absolutely loves the food at the Hunter Corps mess hall. The routine is strict. Wake up at 6 a.m., breakfast at 8:30 a.m., morning training until lunch, afternoon training until dinner. But what Minjun loves the most is the free time at night. There's a PC room inside the facility, equivalent to those outside the army. If you remain consistent and truly a part of the Hunter Corps, you can do whatever you want with your free time. For Minjun, it's a dream come true, getting paid handsomely, being well fed, having time to exercise and play games. This is everything he ever wanted. Minjun rushes up the stairs, fueled by the excitement of his thoughts. The other recruits stare in confusion at his speed and energy. Sergeant Lee, standing at the top of the mountain at the end of the 6,000 steps, hears rapid footsteps and sees Minjun approaching. Who is this guy? It normally takes an average recruit at least an hour to climb the steps. How is he done already? Sergeant Lee wonders. Minjun, however, seems disappointed. Is this it? He asks, pestering the sergeant about something mentioned earlier. Did you say we would get an outing pass if we finished in less than 30 minutes? How long did I take? Sergeant Lee, choosing not to respond verbally, hands him the outing pass. Minjun begins thinking about where to use it, while the sergeant checks the time. Minjun had made a record-breaking climb in 21 minutes, 1 second, and 43 milliseconds, something no one had ever done before. He is the first recruit ever to receive an outing pass. Despite his high stats and strength, Sergeant Lee knows that the ability to react to monsters is the most important skill for the Hunter Corps. He starts to see the potential in Minjun and realizes he'll need to pay close attention to him. Back in the common room, the recruits are having existential crises, worried about the strict training regimen. Hayek, however, is excited to see his stats have increased. The other recruits gather around Minjun, congratulating him and checking their own status windows. Minjun, sitting quietly, wonders why they're all so excited over a single stat point. He recalls his training days in Isgard, where his stats would increase by 10 per day through grueling efforts. You've got an outing pass, what will you use it for? Hayek asks Minjun. Minjun isn't sure but excited about the possibilities. One recruit expresses jealousy, while another mentions overhearing instructors say that no one had ever earned an outing pass from Sergeant Lee before. This excites the other recruits. Do you work out a lot? One recruit asks Minjun. Another comments on how incredible it was to see him climb the stairs like it was nothing. Minjun, feeling something new companionship, thinks about how different this is from his time in Isgard, where people avoided him because he was a Dark Mage. Here, people talk to him and treat him like a normal person, and he likes it. Hayek mentions to another recruit that the PC room is open. Are you going to use it? He asks. The other recruit says he's too tired, but Minjun bursts with energy. The PC room is open. Why are you just telling me this? He runs straight to the PC room, eager to start gaming. Minjun and two other recruits chill in the PC room. Minjun feels more satisfied than ever. Gaming until 9 p.m. he thinks to himself that he'll get at least 2 hours of sleep, which is a luxury compared to the maximum of 1 hour he got in Isgard. The other recruits watch him play Dungeon Power Fighter, amazed that anyone still plays that game. Training continues with Sergeant Lee pushing the soldiers to run consistently with maintained speed. The recruits are exhausted but persist. Increase the distance and maintain your speed. If any recruit cannot complete 40 kilometers in 2 hours, they will not be served breakfast, shouts Sergeant Lee. Minjun, flexing his abilities, finishes the run and takes a sip of water. I hit 10 max levels yesterday, he tells his fellow recruits. Why aren't you even sweating? One asks. This much is nothing more than a stroll, Minjun replies. Another recruit asks if he's seriously played games all night except for 2 hours. Are you a monster or something? The recruit asks. In my own way, I am, Minjun says with a grin. He then offers to share his water. I brought water for my lovely comrades. I guess you guys don't want it, he teases, pretending to spill it on the ground. The recruits flock around him, gratefully taking the water. You guys are like baby chicks, Minjun says, watching them. Sergeant Lee walks into the scene, yelling, the lieutenant is very disappointed in all of you. He begins berating the squadron for their frailty. Even though we are in the last week of training, only half of you can even pass the standard. You are the most lacking squadron we've had to date, Minjun thinks to himself. Why is he referring to himself in the third person? Sergeant Lee continues with a grim look on his face. If you're deployed after your training is over, half of you will die in less than a month. With this kind of outlook, do you think you can even finish the last stage of training? It's called the dungeon adjustment. He explains that the final stage of training, the dungeon adjustment, is the last battle to become a proper soldier of the Hunter Corps. Most dungeons vanish once all the monsters are defeated. But occasionally a dungeon will transform, modifying its internal structure regularly like a procedurally generated maze. This transforming dungeon is a great training facility where recruits can experience every type of environment. The training within this transforming dungeon is notorious for being extremely difficult. The recruits are scared, but the lieutenant prefers this level of tension. He believes in handling recruits like race horses, using a heavy hand when needed, and consoling them with rewards. He announces that the recruit with the highest score from this training will receive a 2-night, 3-day vacation pass. He expects the recruits to be overjoyed, but their reactions are lackluster except for Minjun, who couldn't be happier about a 3-day vacation. Finally, it's time for the hellish dungeon training to begin. The recruits are surprised by the sheer size of the dungeon gate. Some are still confused about what they're supposed to do. A truck nearly runs them over, stopping in front of them and kicking up dirt. The recruits see the truck has broad cages with luminous eyes glaring through the bars. What are these luminous eyes behind the cage? The story continues with two crucial questions. What are those luminous eyes? And what danger is the military planning to introduce to the unsuspecting recruits? As the recruits' eyes adjust to the darkness, they see beasts with large fangs and furry skin. The cage is filled with bloodthirsty hounds, not just regular ones, but a terrifying breed. The recruits are terrified, to quickly hide behind Minjun, while another falls to the ground. Minjun, however, finds the hounds amusing, thinking they look like tiny puppies. The lieutenant screams at the recruits, asking if they're scared of the hounds. He then tells them these are the monsters they will face during their time in the transforming dungeon, scaring the recruits even more. He instructs them to form teams of 4 and enter the dungeon, with the goal of defeating at least one monster and returning to prove themselves as valuable future soldiers of the Hunter Corps. The lieutenant gives them a pep talk, lifting their spirits, then tells them to gear up. An instructor asks the recruits to proceed one by one to pick up their Hunter Corps' exclusive safety suit, also known as the medieval suit. The suit, resembling a piece of armor, is shiny silver with a tough exterior, almost like a steel chassis. It is incredibly heavy and rough, designed solely for protection. The recruits seem skeptical about the armor, wondering if the Hunter Corps could have provided something better. Minjun doesn't like it either, knowing it's probably been used hundreds of times before. He asks the lieutenant if he can take off the armor quickly if he defeats the hounds fast enough. The lieutenant, seeing it's Minjun, agrees but reminds him that the dungeon is a team exercise, and he must ensure his team's safety while completing their goal. Minjun knows the other recruits are incompetent, so he explains his plan. The hounds will leap to attack, grab them by their legs and snap their backs. If they don't die, fold their backs in the opposite direction and rip them apart. His excitement contrasts with the recruits' amused expressions. The lieutenant shouts for the hounds to be released. The instructor opens the cage door, and the hounds immediately jump out, growling and drooling. They run through the dungeon's massive door, vanishing. The recruits are confused about why the hounds didn't attack. Minjun explains they saw their home and instinctively ran towards it, impressing the recruits with his knowledge of monster psychology. He wishes he could tell them about his time in Isgard and his past as a Dark Mage, but he cannot divulge this information. The lieutenant scolds them for joking on the holy training grounds, then decides Minjun's team will be the first to enter the dungeon. The sergeant waves his red lightsaber-like signal, and the 4 recruits walk towards the dungeon. One has a determined look, 2 are worried, and Minjun is excited to get things going so he can take off the heavy, dirty chest plate. The lieutenant radios the instructor team inside the dungeon, who confirm the team's entry. The devil instructor, on protection duty, sees Minjun and is surprised by his prowess, wondering if he will perform as well in the dungeon. The bloodthirsty hounds stare from the crevices, ready to strike. As Minjun and his team walk deeper into the dungeon, the hounds follow stealthily. Minjun, aware of the situation, knows he can take them down but needs his team to contribute for their stat points. The hounds are about to attack, Minjun warns. The recruits, frozen in fear, don't listen. Minjun takes the lead. When a hound runs towards him, he dodges and punches it on the head, immediately killing it. One of the other recruits gets pounced on by a hound, its jaws sinking into his arm. The recruit screams for help, and Minjun quickly rushes to him. With a powerful kick, he sends the hound flying into the wall, killing it instantly. He helps the recruit up and realizes the situation is more dire than he thought. Minjun starts dishing out battle knowledge. We must fight back, or the hounds will overwhelm us. They sense our fear and think we're easy prey if we don't attack. We outnumber them, so we can easily overwhelm them. If this were a real-world situation, 2 of us would be dead by now because of that fear. He rallies his team, telling them to put pressure on the last hound. Under Minjun's guidance, all 3 recruits attack it together. The instructor, hiding in the crevices, is shocked to see this unfold. Minjun's leadership and attitude leave them wide-eyed and baffled. The recruits manage to overwhelm the hound, taking it down with their combined efforts. The instructors begin forming conspiracy theories, wondering if Minjun is really a recruit or a secret instructor deployed without their knowledge. They calculate the scores of the team, with Minjun scoring the highest. His great physical strength and leadership skills helped his team overcome the challenge. The rest of Minjun's squad receives average scores, but they celebrate their victory, relieved to have overcome their most daunting challenge so far. The instructors jump out of hiding, praising them for their performance. They instruct the recruits to follow them back to the exit. Minjun, curious about the instructor's presence, pesters them about the vacation pass and mocks them for caring about the recruits while acting tough. The conversation lightens the mood until they reach the gate. Suddenly, the ground begins to shake, the recruits worrying if it's an earthquake, but Minjun explains that the dungeon is simply transforming. However, the instructors start to panic as the dungeon door begins to shrink and close. The recruits panic too, but Minjun remains calm. The instructors try to contact the lieutenant through their radio, but it's dead due to the rapid transformation of the dungeon. The instructors explain that they had over a month before the dungeon's internal structure would change, but this unexpected occurrence has accelerated the process. They decide to take the recruits to a safe space to hold out. They explain the situation to the recruits, trying to calm their fears, and assure them that the Hunter Corps is likely assessing the situation from outside, and that the lieutenant will take proper steps to get them to safety. Minjun, however, knows they are just trying to keep the recruits calm. He realizes this is an unusual and ominous situation. He wonders if the dungeon has transformed into an enclosed dungeon, which would make it harder to defeat. Despite the situation, he remains confident he can keep everyone safe. The instructors have a private conversation. One instructor reveals to the other that the dungeon has transformed into an enclosed dungeon. This surprises the other instructor, who, despite being part of the renowned Hunter Corps, had no idea. The first instructor explains how enclosed dungeons work. A transformative dungeon turns into an enclosed dungeon only when an outsider enters it. Their entry caused the transformation. To get out of an enclosed dungeon, they must defeat every single monster within it. This means the instructors gather the recruits and explain the situation. Everyone's on edge. They have to clear this dungeon with just 4 recruits and 2 instructors, and they have no clue what kind of monsters are lurking inside. The real kicker, the instructors aren't even fully equipped for this kind of mission. It's like sending a plumber to fix a spaceship. But hey, they've got to work with what they've got and keep moving forward. The head instructor is sweating bullets, knowing that even a goblin could spell disaster. It would take him at least 10 minutes just to take one down. In a desperate brainstorm, the head instructor thinks about using the recruits' protective suits as a kind of meat shield. Yep, you heard that right. But then his conscience kicks in. He's put these recruits through grueling training, and they trust him. He can't just throw them to the wolves or goblins. In this case, his self-esteem won't allow it. The recruits are scared, but they press on, following their instructors. Suddenly, Minjun feels something's off. He glances back at one of the instructors. The head instructor notices and asks what's going on. Everyone turns to see the other instructor clutching his throat and struggling to breathe. Then, with thick foam frothing from his mouth, he collapses to the floor. The other instructor rushes to help but then collapses too, with white foam coming from his mouth. Both instructors are out cold. Kim checks on them and reassures the recruits that it's nothing serious, they've just fainted. Recognizing a familiar scent, he picks up the instructors and tosses them to the recruits. "Catch!" he shouts. The recruits catch them, and Kim tells them to stay near the exit and not follow him. They scream for him to come back, but he's already sprinting deeper into the dungeon, bursting with excitement. In his internal monologue, Kim explains what's going on. The instructors fainted due to demonic energy, something he never expected to find on Earth. This energy is deadly for normal humans, and even guardians need protection from it. But for a dark mage like Kim, it's like a phone charger. He runs deeper into the dungeon, excitement building as he gets closer to the source of the super dense demonic energy. Kim finally reaches a chamber filled with glowing purple crystals but finds nothing. Just silence. He's about to give up when he realizes he needs to look up. There, above him, is his prey, a massive alpha hound, pulsating with demonic energy. Its 4 eyes glow purple, its teeth are as big as knives, and its claws are sharper than cutthroat daggers. This is the fight Kim has been craving for ages. He never dreamed of facing a dark hound in this dungeon, so this was definitely a pleasant surprise for our hero. Dark hounds are vastly different from regular hounds, and Kim Minjun had encountered one during his first year in Isgard. Back then, he was terrified and underleveled, almost dying in the process. But now he's the final raid boss. Kim Minjun, no longer a rookie, is thrilled to see a familiar face. With full confidence in his abilities as a dark mage and hunter, he's ready to take this hellhound head-on. The monster, hanging from the ceiling, locks eyes with Kim and decides to pounce. Kim pulls his hand back, closing his fist just like he did when he punched that redstone before joining the Hunter Corps. His smile infuriates the monster, which lunges at him immediately. "Thanks for the meal," Kim says, as he delivers a punch so fast that it sends the monster flying with just a touch. The dark hound dies instantly, and an insane amount of demonic energy pours out. Kim, of course, takes the opportunity to absorb every bit of it, but the scent of the monster's blood is still in the air, just as sickening as Kim remembered. Dark hounds are notorious for their poisonous blood, which can cause human skin to rot on contact. Kim stares at his veiny hand, covered in the monster's blood. But here's the thing about dark magic, none of those poisonous effects apply. For dark mages like Kim, the venomous blood and demonic energy are more like a power-up than a threat. Kim drains the monster of all its demonic energy, feeling a rush he hadn't experienced in ages. He grins, relishing the moment. "Well, that was refreshing," he chuckles, wiping his hand clean. However, this whole ordeal left Kim wondering. How did a dark hound, a monster normally only found in Isgard, end up on Earth in an enclosed dungeon? He'd always considered the idea of monsters on Earth harboring demonic energy, but the instructors were completely unprepared for it. This had to be the first instance of something like this happening. He hadn't seen a single note about demonic energy in any training manuals or monster education at the training center. The possibility of a dark hound managing interdimensional travel on its own was laughable. Kim Minjun had a theory. Only a dark mage as powerful as him, or maybe a saint who could utilize God's powers, could pull something like this off. Anyone else, no chance. Though, at the end, he wondered if he might just be overthinking things and tried to convince himself that it might just be a minor occurrence or coincidence. For now, he decided to take the monster's corpse back to report to his superiors. The journey wasn't over yet. They still had a dungeon to escape from. This new incident raised more questions than ever for Kim Minjun. Previously, new recruits were sent into the dungeon for training, and Minjun had showcased results far above his rank. The training was over, and the party was about to head back. But before they could step out of the gate, the dungeon transformed, and they lost their way. A wave of mysterious energy knocked out the instructors, and Minjun went ahead to investigate on his own. He came across the massive dark hound and, after defeating it, felt some of his demonic energy restored. Back to the present, the instructors are being woken up by the young recruits' voices. The head instructor opens his eyes, hearing the panic in their voices. They calm down a bit when he wakes up, but then he screams out loud, as if waking from a terrifying nightmare. This scares the life out of the recruits, who momentarily think their instructors have turned into zombies. After regaining composure, the instructors check to see if everyone is okay. The recruits assure them they're fine but reveal that Kim Minjun delved deeper into the dungeon alone, shocking the instructors. They can't believe Minjun would do such a thing. The head instructor thinks Minjun's behavior should get him kicked out of the academy, but he knows he doesn't have the authority to make that decision, especially since he fainted instead of keeping the recruits safe. Just when the instructor thinks about going out to save Minjun, one of the recruits points to the other side of the cave. There stands Minjun, carrying the corpse of the monster he killed on his back. The instructors are shocked once again. Seems like making this face is their only job. They look at the hound and realize it looks very different from the regular ones. Minjun drops the monster on the floor and tells the instructors to take a closer look. They analyze the body and realize it's the creature that caused them to faint. The recruits, on the other hand, are also in disbelief, wondering how their comrade managed to kill such a big monster. Minjun heads towards the cave's entrance and notices the portal gate has opened. The lead instructor puts a hand on Minjun's shoulder and asks if he really defeated the hound on his own. Instead of a verbal response, Minjun just nods. The instructor, sweating, nods back and acknowledges the recruit's achievement. The lead instructor orders the other one to lead the recruits out of the dungeon while he stays to talk to Minjun. Once everyone leaves, the instructor takes the opportunity to speak with him in front of the portal gate. He tells Minjun to detail everything in a report and give it to the lieutenant, emphasizing that he should leave nothing out, even how incompetent the instructors were. It turns out this guy doesn't care much about his reputation. He's way too honest for a soldier. Covering his face with embarrassment, he admits they fainted instead of keeping the recruits safe, and he has no excuse for letting his guard down. Finally, he thanks Minjun for making sure everyone was safe and genuinely appreciates it. Minjun blushes, glad to be of help but a little embarrassed by the compliments. The instructor puts his hat back on, saving the little dignity he has left, and says he must accept his wrongs like a man. He then suggests they head back. As they leave the cave with the portal blaring blue lights, the instructor wonders how to report the cause of his unconsciousness. Minjun, on the other hand, is ecstatic. He's just received a bunch of compliments from his comrades and instructors. It's a good day for him. As he's about to leave the dungeon, a notification window pops up, telling him that the error has been fixed. Minjun is frustrated as he questions, "What kind of error is this?" He curses at the system, stating that it's as ridiculous in this world as it was in the other one. The window pops up again, this time showing his stats: 60 points in strength, agility, and stamina, 10 points of demonic energy, and an E-ranking skill called corruption. He looks at the window and wonders if that's all because it seems extremely strange. Then, his eyes glance over something else on the window. He's the founder of a cult named Luminuna. Shocked and embarrassed, he recalls the backstory of this particular blunder. He started the cult out of his love for a character named Bloomy from a game called Dungeon Power Fighter. At the peak of his powers in Isgard, he created this cult as a joke to get rid of stalkers and creeps who pestered him about pursuing world dominance. Ironically, it only made them like him more. As he looks at his stat window, he realizes he's gotten much weaker. His stats are worse than he expected, which he knew would happen as a penalty for dimensional travel back to Earth. The most annoying part. Out of his endless skills, only one remained, and it's low ranking. An expression of pure frustration takes over his face. It feels like he's in a third-rate novel where the hero has to start from level 1. Stories like this made him extremely nauseated. Despite this setback, Minjun's confidence remains unshaken. He knows if he could reach the peak of dark magic powers in another world, he can do it again here. For now, his objective is crystal clear. He has to recover his powers as soon as possible to prevent any more delays in game development due to monsters popping up. Minjun shakes himself out of it, realizing it's doable. After all, he's faced the torture of Isgard, where the cafeteria food alone could break even the toughest warrior. The scene switches to the training center, where utter chaos has taken place. There are 3 reasons for this chaos: the dungeon gate closing during training, a lack of clear instructions from the lieutenant, and the fact that a single recruit destroyed a new species of monster they had never seen before. All this happened while the instructors were unconscious. Because of these unforeseen events, the recruits should have received private ranks and enjoyed some freedom until their dispatch, but that wasn't going to be the case. The recruits are in the sleeping room, wondering why they're on standby despite the crazy events of the last week of training. They're annoyed they don't even get to watch TV. What's the point of surviving a monster attack if you can't catch up on your favorite shows? One of Minjun's teammates asks if he really managed to capture a huge hound by himself. Minjun nonchalantly confirms it, while some recruits wonder if Minjun will get the rank of sergeant within 2 years. Others aren't so sure because the Hunter Corps exams are notoriously difficult. I mean, have you seen those questions? Even the monsters wouldn't pass. In the battalion commander's office, we see our hero standing tall and saluting the commander. The commander glances at Minjun and says, "Relax, soldier. You look like you're about to take on another monster." The commander salutes back and invites Minjun to come in. The lieutenant, lying on the floor in a very awkward position, is quickly told to get out. He salutes before stumbling out of the room, leaving Minjun alone with the commander. Laughing, the commander tells Minjun that any lieutenant who doesn't check the dungeons properly deserves to be punished. As he sits down, he waves off formalities, indicating they need to have a serious conversation. Minjun, wide-eyed and confused, listens as the commander begins. "Since you received the highest score, I have a special proposal for you," the commander says. He asks Minjun if he's interested in hearing it, and Minjun nods eagerly. The commander uses a metaphor, a crane among a flock of chickens, describing someone exceptionally skilled compared to their peers. He gazes at Minjun, marveling at his talent, glad to have such an extraordinary person under his command. He never imagined there would be a crane in his flock of chickens. Minjun is so skilled that he makes everyone else look like amateurs. The commander's thoughts wander as he considers Minjun's placement. It would be a waste of talent to put him in regular ranks. He knows about Minjun's ambition to rise quickly, but according to the rules, privates can't take promotion exams for at least a year after passing their recruitment finals. However, the commander proposes an exception, making Minjun's eyes sparkle with excitement. The commander laughs heartily, speaking with authority. He tells Minjun that if he joins the Hunter Corps in Korin, he'll use his power to grant this exception. "Just imagine," the commander says, "no waiting another year. What do you say?" Minjun contemplates the offer, and the two share a moment of quiet reflection. The commander wonders if he has proposed too much for the recruit because even someone of Minjun's skill would think twice before agreeing to join Corwin. Minjun is still mulling over the opportunity, thinking about the 104th Division, known as the Invincible Hunter Squad. His comrades had always warned him to avoid Corwin, a place with constant snowfall, freezing weather, and the most extreme version of the front lines where monsters and dungeons appear out of thin air. You can imagine Minjun's initial thoughts. It's a fun opportunity. He wants to advance, no matter where he's placed, and the promotion exception is a big plus. Not to mention, a bunch of dungeons full of monsters sounds like the perfect conditions for him to become as powerful as possible. He needs to advance at any cost for his plans to work, because the higher his rank, the more leveling opportunities open up for him. With determination in his voice, Minjun agrees to the proposal. The commander, initially shocked by Minjun's swift agreement, tells him sternly that he will go, a look of accomplishment and self-confidence on his face. Outside the Hunter Corps Training Center, a group of newly made privates stand with their bags. One private, Raka, is crying his eyes out, saying goodbye to Minjun and begging him to keep in touch. Minjun swears he will, even as Raka pesters him from the car. Another guy watches and cringes, asking why Minjun would volunteer for Corwin. Minjun just looks at his friend and says it's too difficult to explain. His goal is something insane. The sky looks beautiful as the two friends talk. Raka asks if it's something like achieving max level 100 times. Minjun, already at max level 30 times, says it shouldn't be too difficult to reach 100. His friend calls him crazy, but with a tone of admiration. They bid farewell, and Minjun watches Raka leave, realizing the loudest guy is gone. Standing alone outside the training center, Minjun wonders why he's the only one left. Suddenly, a large military truck pulls up, braking right at his feet. The door opens, and he hears his name. A large man with a heavily muscular physique and thick sunglasses stands before him. His name tag reads Kim Minji. Minjun, with a sense of wonder, asks if Minji waited long. Minji, explaining it took too long because of the snow, tells Minjun to get in the back of the truck. Minjun quietly gets in and puts his stuff down, ready for the ride of his life. As the truck starts moving, Minjun is glad to begin his life as a soldier. He doesn't mind difficult training or frequent battles with monsters, but one thing terrifies him: hazing. He hopes he won't end up in miserable situations, being trolled or pranked by his comrades. He simply lacks the patience for it at the moment, but knows he must endure it for now. The ride goes smoothly, with calming views of pristine scenery and architecture. Minjun falls asleep, but wakes up to see snow falling everywhere. He can hardly believe his eyes as they reach the Invincible Hunter Corps' headquarters in Corwin. There really is snow here. Minjun walks with Kim Minji through the halls of the headquarters. Minji, with his veiny muscular hands, opens a door and pushes Minjun inside, announcing that he's the newbie. Minjun enters the room to see a bunch of boys either cleaning or relaxing. Minji orders them to feed Minjun and instruct him on what to do. The boys' eyes begin to glisten when they see a newbie, rallying around him and asking his name. Once they find out, they talk about how Minjun was called a super soldier, the guy who killed that hound by himself. One of them picks up Minjun's bag and throws it to another boy, telling him to unpack Minjun's stuff. Minjun looks at them, realizing they might be the alphas of this storm. He also notices the way they are looking at him as if they've found a new play toy. They ask why he chose to volunteer for Corwin despite having such good grades. Minjun answers their query by saying that the front lines are the best place for experience and the fastest way to advance. They look at him in confusion for a second, then their expressions change completely as they call him crazy and admire his choice. They begin bombarding him with questions, asking if he has a sister or a girlfriend. Minjun says no to both questions, so they ask him to show them his talent. Wondering if they'll buzz off if he does, he raises a finger and tells them he'll show them one-finger push-ups. One of them scoffs, saying they can do that all day, but another tells Minjun to go ahead and show them. Their expressions change so fast it feels like someone took the light out of their lives. Minjun puts his finger on the ground and does full vertical push-ups using just his finger. They are completely shocked, having never expected him to do it vertically. As they marvel, one of them mentions that there's someone else who could do that too. Just then, a man dressed in uniform arrives at the dormitory door. He walks up to Minjun, who is still in the vertical push-up position, and tells him to stop showing off. Minjun immediately recognizes the voice. It's Sergeant Lisumho, his previous instructor. Minjun is taken aback to see him in the same dorm room, But the others, used to Lisumho, begin to berate and annoy him about being dispatched as an instructor. Frustrated, the sergeant screams that he has only 4 days left and tells them to leave him alone. Funnily enough, they were already tired of the conversation and just flip him the bird before moving on. The sergeant, now lying on a bed, turns on his phone and starts watching a video about volcanic dungeons. Minjun realizes that even in a space as tiny as this dorm, the rank difference is significant. The sergeant calls out to one of the privates named Dongjin, telling him to instruct Minjun since he's a junior. Minjun looks at Dongjin, wondering how he is his senior. Dongjin asks if Minjun wants to talk over some food because he has a permit to visit the PX. They head to the PX, and Dongjin tells Minjun to pick out whatever he wants. At the counter, the basket full of food leads to a bill of 300,000 won, and Dongjin pays it, shaking in his boots. Minjun chows down on the food, and Dongjin tells him to enjoy it. Minjun asks why they're not allowed to use the PX regularly, and Dongjin explains that according to the rank system, privates and below are only allowed to go there on weekends. Additionally, one needs to be a private first class or above to use the gyms, and if you want to use the PC room, you need to be a corporal. Kim almost chokes on his food upon hearing this, finding it crazy that you need such a high rank to use the PC room. Dongjin agrees that it's unreasonable but knows he can't change anything at his rank right now. With curiosity in his voice, Minjun asks if there's any way to change that. Dongjin explains that the only way is by getting to the rank of sergeant. Minjun is heartbroken and extremely frustrated because he was really looking forward to the PC room. Dongjin dives deeper, telling him it's very difficult to become a sergeant in the Hunter Corps. He shares a bit about himself, saying he's failed the advancement exam many times and has been stuck as a private first class for 3 years. Minjun thinks he should get promoted quickly so he can bring Dongjin up with him. He encourages Dongjin to keep trying, assuring him he'll surely get it next time. Just then, another bully arrives, putting his arms around Dongjin. Eating the delicious food by yourselves? He asks. Dongjin offers to have the guy join them, seeing as he's a corporal. Of course, the corporal says yes and begins chowing down, eating the chips, and drinking all the soda. Minjun looks at him in disdain, thinking, this guy is a piece of work. After eating, the corporal tells them he won't say anything about their chatting, but they better be present during firearms training tomorrow, or it will be their funeral. Dongjin steps in, saying he was about to explain firearms training to Minjun since it's different in Korin than other places. The corporal takes offense and begins to mock and ridicule Dongjin. Despite Dongjin's apologies, the corporal continues to bully him. Annoyed by what he's witnessing, Minjun decides he won't just sit there and watch. Under the table, Minjun channels demonic energy into the food the corporal is eating, cursing it so the corporal spits it out. The corporal's face goes numb, and he stands up abruptly. Dongjin asks what's wrong, but the corporal doesn't respond. Sweating profusely and feeling sick, the corporal mumbles something about checking the expiration date on the food. Trying to save his dignity, he says it's probably nothing and walks away holding his stomach. Minjun grins, knowing he used his corruption skill on the corporal. Turning back to Dongjin, Minjun asks about firearms training. Dongjin explains that in the Invincible Hunter Squad, they use bullets with even higher power than the monster-killing bullets used by regular Hunter Corps. The guns have a much higher kick. Imagine regular ICM bullets as ponies, but the Invincible Hunter Squad bullets are like wild stallions. Dongjin says, the recoil is so much it could challenge even an extremely skilled gunslinger. He adds that because monsters appear more frequently here, they need the extra firepower. Minjun finds the metaphor fitting, thinking about the ranged weapons he had to make do with in Isgard, comparing them to elephants. If those were elephants, and these are ponies and stallions, he feels confident in his ability to handle them. He grins excitedly, looking forward to the training. The day of the training arrives, and the soldiers head to the location. The firearms training facility is filled with shooting noises. Soldiers blast away at their targets, flares lighting up the room. Among them is Minjun, skillfully handling his weapon and drawing impressed looks from his comrades. Minjun is slightly disappointed that he missed one shot. The target, flabbergasted, states that 19 shots were direct hits and only one was a miss. His two alpha roommates are shocked, while Dongjin stands in awe of Minjun's gun skills. Minjun stands proudly with his gun, as people wonder whether he's a cyborg or just incredibly lucky. Up in a booth, two shadowy figures Lieutenant Kim Mitchell and Sergeant Hyatisiak look down at the firearms training, completely entranced by Minjun's skill. The roommates ask Minjun how he shot like that, and he simply says he just did what he was instructed to do. Kim Minji, the hulking behemoth of a man, emerges from behind the two so-called alphas and praises Minjun's shooting. He says he looks forward to seeing Minjun shoot in the special training in the afternoon. Minjun is immediately intrigued. The alpha roommates start pestering Kim Minji, accusing him of being biased towards Minjun. Kim Minji tells them to quit it and put their helmets on. The rest of the soldiers start clapping for Minjun, and Dongjin compliments him even more. Minjun thanks him and asks what the special firearms training entails. Dongjin says he doesn't know much about it but shares what he knows. The special firearms training consists of two-person teams working in a training facility to eliminate monsters. On the way to the destination, the monsters will be moving targets and will attack them. There will also be civilian target plates that pop up randomly, and they must avoid shooting them as that will result in an automatic failure. Dongjin reassures Minjun not to worry about the actual monsters, saying it will be a controlled environment with proper supervision. However, if Dongjin knew Minjun, he'd know that nothing gets our hero more excited and joyous than the prospect of fighting real monsters. After the firing test, the group of soldiers enjoys lunch, a feast with lots of different dishes to choose from. Dongjin is still in shock at the fact that Minjun managed to hit 19 shots at the target, while Minjun compliments Dongjin for hitting 13 shots himself. Dongjin, modest as always, mentions that he has some experience but isn't very good. He believes Sergeant Lee is one of the best soldiers, averaging at least 17 shots, making him the top shooter in the squad. Minjun listens while eating and acknowledges that since 10 hits is the squad's average, Sergeant Lee is indeed much better than the rest. However, he also realizes that he is now officially the #1 shooter. Dongjin then gives Minjun a word of encouragement, saying he's sure that Minjun will do great in the special firearms training. Minjun, curious, asks why Dongjin, who mentioned two-person teams, is speaking as if he won't be joining him. Dongjin explains that the executives decide the teams, so they never know who they'll be paired with. This makes Minjun even more curious, and he asks how the teams are decided. Dongjin starts explaining a rumor he heard. The teams are decided through a method called the letter lottery, essentially a raffle designed to create random pairings. The scene switches from the cafeteria to the special firearms shooting range. Burly Sergeant Minji is barking orders, telling the soldiers to get into their bulletproof vests and be on standby as the training will commence in 5 minutes. Every soldier in the room is gossiping, wondering what the special firearms test will be like. Minjun is standing there, minding his business, but of course, he doesn't get peace for too long. A man dressed in uniform comes yelling that he's on the team with the newbie, looking at Minjun. It turns out Minjun is teamed up with none other than the corporal, who enjoyed hazing. The corporal walks in, boasting that a corporal and a private are worlds apart, and flaunting his own skill. Minjun is definitely taken aback, wondering why he had to team up with this guy of all people. He also realizes that the corporal hasn't learned his lesson yet. The corporal starts talking to Minjun, telling him that the average finish time in the squad is 3 minutes, and that Minjun should aim to meet or exceed it. His face has a devious look as he says that Minjun must finish within 3 minutes, or he's going to regret it. Minjun simply looks at him without responding, which annoys the corporal. He asks Minjun why he isn't replying, pestering him by saying that he's lost confidence and his 19 perfect shots were just a fluke. Minjun is internally frustrated, thinking about how much of a hassle this guy is, but he just says that he'll try his best to shut the blithering idiot up. The corporal doesn't care about that, he just wants Minjun to provide results. He says if Minjun finishes later than him, he'll regret it. He points at the squad, talking to Sergeant Minji, and says they should observe the team going ahead. The two soldiers stand in different elevators, while Minji stands in the middle, telling them to get ready. It's Kim Munji and Jong Han Yang, and both state that they're ready. They start descending. The special firearms training is a unique creature. It involves two team members in separate elevators being sent down to the underground facility. This tactical training teaches soldiers to slay monsters and protect civilians. Now, it has evolved into a competition among the troops. It's a race, with the goal being to reach the end fastest and cleanest, pressing the finish button before your opponent. Minjun looks at the large scoreboard to ensure he understands the situation. There are different sized monster icons, and he wonders why. The corporal explains that it showcases the threat level. The more dangerous a monster, the bigger the icon. He begins explaining the format of the special firearms trial. There are 2 monsters in each lane, and 1 encounter is randomized. Due to this format, you have no clue what you're getting into, and it will surprise you. In the lanes, we see a participant currently in the trial running into a rake toad, a large and powerful creature. The rake toad attacks with its tongue, and he seems to have gotten unlucky with the monster selection. On the screen, we can see that the participant ran into the bigger monster ahead. Minjun realizes that even if he moves fast, bad luck with monsters means his opponent could catch up. The opponent runs into a large rat and quickly shoots it to shreds. Confident of an easy trial, he immediately encounters a huge earthworm. Meanwhile, the guy who fought the rake toad just got another one to battle. Visibly frustrated, he unloads a whole clip into it. Annoyed, he thinks his opponent has probably already won. But when he reaches the finish button, it's empty. No one is near it. He walks over and presses it with a big smile. The buzzer sounds, and the crowd celebrates as the challenge is completed in 2 minutes and 24 seconds. The winner mocks the loser, while the loser just complains about his bad luck. It turns out they had a bet, and now the loser must treat the winner at the PX. On the way back, they notice that, besides being late, the loser also accidentally shot a civilian, which disqualified him. They walk out bantering about what to buy, and the corporal mentions they made a bet before going in. This catches Minjun's attention, and he's intrigued by the idea of a bet. He suggests they make one too, and he proposes that the loser must grant the winner one wish. This makes the corporal laugh, but he decides to humor Minjun out of overconfidence. He says there's nothing a mere private like Minjun could offer him, but eventually agrees. He decides that if Minjun loses, he'll have to give him his salary for 3 months. Though Minjun is a bit disappointed that the corporal couldn't come up with something more interesting than money, he agrees to the condition. The corporal is pleased and confident in his own abilities. Dongjin notices the two talking and starts to feel a bit nervous. Meanwhile, Sergeant Minji shouts for the next group to get ready. Minjun and the corporal step into their separate elevators, preparing for the trial ahead. The elevators start descending, and we see Minjun lost in thought as he heads to the underground levels. He realizes he fell for the corporal's provocation and regrets drawing attention to himself. But he knows he's not mature enough to let provocation slide. As the elevator doors open, his demonic aura senses the demons in the trial. At the top level of the building, the other candidates are glued to the score screen, excited about the trial. They're discussing the bet between the two candidates and are confused about how a private could hope to win against a corporal. Suddenly, a harsh tremor shakes the ground, causing some to lose their footing in fear. The candidates wonder if it was an earthquake. Dongjin doesn't think so. They look at the screen and are shocked to see one of the monsters moving towards the other monster in Minjun's lane. The door opens, and Minjun makes his way through the lane, wondering about the tremor. His face shows confusion and instinct as he sees a gigantic one-eyed monster with huge claws and horns devouring a large rat monster. It looks like Minjun will have to face the toughest monster yet. Realizing it might just be another big body monster, he calms down but is puzzled by why it's eating another monster. The monster spots Minjun and rages, throwing the rat at him. Minjun dodges and lands safely, a thought entering his mind. I hope fried chicken is on the menu for dinner. Let's get this over with fast. He notices a civilian target he's not supposed to shoot and realizes he can't shoot mindlessly. The monster steps towards him, and Minjun prepares some demonic energy in his left hand, wondering why the creature is rampaging. The monster tries to grab him with its massive claws, but Minjun strikes with a fistful of demonic energy, carving through the creature's arm with 3 precise slashes. The monster screams in pain as its hand is torn apart. Minjun smiles, thinking he just needs to shoot it down. However, his attention is caught again as the monster's arm begins to regrow right before his eyes. Instead of a hand, it regrows a giant sword. The troops watching the screen are confused about what's happening and why one of the monsters is missing. Minji looks at the situation and has a revelation. If the first monster is missing, then the second monster must be the Cyclops. Cyclops, also known as devouring demons, consume energy to enhance their regenerative and attacking capabilities. Minji wonders what could have provoked this usually passive creature to break out of captivity and go on a rampage after devouring the other monster. It turns out it was our boy Minjun and his intense demonic aura. Minji smirks, realizing the chaos Minjun inadvertently caused. Meanwhile, as Minjun finds himself airborne, dodging the Cyclops' aggressive slashes. He loads his gun, knowing it's training, but decides to indulge in some firearm fun. Bullets tear through the Cyclops' eye, and the monster roars in pain. As Minjun lands, he notices the Cyclops' eye isn't regenerating quickly, giving him an opening to end it. But the monster quickly turns toward him. Minjun runs toward it, ready to strike, but the Cyclops retaliates by swinging its sword arm. He's taken by surprise as the Cyclops, even blinded, knows his exact location. Minjun dodges and ducks the arm slash, but the monster attacks with its other hand, slamming him into the ground. It looks dire, but Minjun manages to block the attack. As he struggles to hold back the monster, he wonders why the training center would unleash such a violent creature. Despite crushing its eye, the Cyclops continues to pinpoint his location precisely. Back at the elevator, Minji enters the second lane with his oversized LMG, worried about Minjun's safety. He blames himself for letting things escalate. An energy-fed Cyclops is no match for a private at all. He rushes through the lane, hoping Minjun hasn't met his demise. Meanwhile, the corporal is having a blast in the trial, cruising toward a finish time of 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Confident that Minjun never stood a chance, he plans how he'll spend Minjun's salary on his upcoming vacations. But as he nears the finish line, his hopes are dashed. There stands Minjun, casually inspecting the finish button. He glances back at the corporal with an indifferent expression, then flashes a devious smile and presses the button. The corporal's face falls, realizing his plans have just been ruined, at least for now. Minji arrives at the spot where Minjun battled the Cyclops. He looks at the gruesome scene and asks how Minjun managed to bring the monster to such a state. The carnage above the monster's chest is graphic enough to shock even the corporal. Minjun walks out of the elevator to cheers and applause. The others show their admiration for him after defeating the fed Cyclops. Dongjin rushes in, asking if Minjun is okay. Minjun reassures his buddy that he's unharmed. Dongjin eagerly asks how he defeated the Cyclops, and Minjun credits it all to Dongjin's teachings. The corporal seethes with jealousy. One of the troops points out that Minjun won the bet fair and square. The corporal smacks the troop on the back of the head, threatening him for speaking out of turn. He claims it was an unfair situation and makes excuses, insisting he couldn't have won under those circumstances. He argues that the special firearms training was designed for 2 monsters, and he did defeat 2. He challenges how many newbies they've defeated and emphasizes that Minjun only took down 1 monster. Pointing fingers, he insists it was an unfair situation and pressures Dongjin to agree. Dongjin, feeling intimidated, hesitates to respond until ordered to speak up by the corporal. Minjun wonders why the corporal has to be so difficult. Despite the unexpected turn of events, he doesn't feel good about defeating the monster with his bare hands. He considers letting go of the bet. Watching the corporal badger Dongjin, he decides he can't let it slide. Someone from the crowd steps forward, hearing the commotion. In a bold voice, they mock the corporal, asserting that the newbie took the bigger risk and that the corporal should be ashamed. The corporal turns to see who spoke up. The mystery person enlightens everyone about the Cyclops, explaining they start harmless but become ferociously challenging once provoked. They argue that Minjun faced a much greater threat, and everyone present realizes the wisdom behind their words. It turns out to be none other than Sergeant Lee Seung-ho. The corporal is embarrassed, trying to save face by mocking Sergeant Lee's rank in front of the junior sergeant. Sergeant Lee shuts him down, saying that the corporal is the one always showing off and tells him to stop, embarrassing him over his jokes. The sergeant decides to double down. He tells the corporal that everything that doesn't go his way becomes a joke to him. Sergeant Lee says that being of higher rank is great because he gets to embarrass stubborn donkeys like the corporal. Minjun smiles, realizing that's how things work, while the corporal turns red with embarrassment, anger, and every other bad feeling. This is the face everyone wanted to see. Comment down below if you're satisfied as well. Sergeant Lee turns to the corporal, seeing his reaction, and asks if he has anything to say. The corporal brushes it off and says he doesn't. The sergeant tells him he's right, he doesn't have anything to say because he shouldn't leave the corporal embarrassed in front of his juniors. As Sergeant Lee walks away, it's evening, and Dongjin and Minjun are standing outside, cleaning and conversing. They talk about Sergeant Lee receiving a double promotion. Dongjin tells Minjun that Sergeant Lee was a special case since he had the highest grade in the advancement exams. He continues, explaining that the 2-rank promotion has now been made and available because a staff sergeant who got it caused an accident in a dungeon. Sergeant Lee was the last case of this double-rank promotion. Minjun wonders if there are ways to get special advancements, and Dongjin tells him that there are exceptions, like rescuing a civilian during an emergency or achieving outstanding accomplishments in a monster hunt, but they're all subjective cases. He tells Minjun to forget that the regulation even exists, as many hunters who have advanced with it. Minjun acknowledges this, realizing that subjective means the commander will have the final say. Desperate for advancement, he doesn't wish danger on civilians but is almost disappointed that there aren't enough incidents happening on this border. He wants to advance already, even though he's been a private for only 2 days. Dongjin encourages him as Minjun wishes for a gate to appear. Just as he thinks that, alarming activity spreads across the camp, and a broadcast from the control center announces that middle bats have appeared at an all reserve. They instruct all hunters to gather there and immediately install the protective shield. Dongjin tells Minjun that they are going, and Minjun grins. Middle bats are monsters the size of a human child that live in colonies and attack. Individually, they do not pose a threat, but they can spit fireballs, which could be disastrous for the old reserve. The entire military camp could be blown away if the old reserve is compromised. 2 soldiers stand guard at the old reserve as the bats approach. One soldier points his gun at the monsters, but the other stops him from shooting. He tells him that shooting might provoke an attack, compromising the old reserve. The soldier questions this decision, asking if he should just watch the monsters. The other soldier, thinking smarter, suggests they observe since the bats aren't approaching. The issue has been reported, and a squad with a protective shield is on the way. The soldier with the itchy trigger finger asks what happens if the monsters blow up the old reserve, making his comrade feel super nervous. They imagine an incredibly huge explosion that would devour the entire military camp. They start panicking, wondering what they should do and why the middle bats showed up in this spot. Finally, Minjun walks in, stating that he will draw their attention. The soldiers are surprised to see a newbie being this bold. They scream at him to fall back since he doesn't have any equipment. To Minjun, the middle bats are guests who will help him advance quicker. Not only will he get recognition for saving the military camp, but he will also gain a ton of experience points. As he walks towards the middle bats, flaunting his demonic energy, he thinks of the Cyclops and remembers that monsters are attracted to his demonic energy. The bats immediately notice his aura and start circling around him. He smiles at how perfectly it worked out and gets ready to take them down. A squadron carrying a large crate rushes towards the old reserve but suddenly halts as Dongjin is completely stunned. Sergeant Lee looks at the idiots just standing there and tells them to install the shield immediately. They are so stunned that they have trouble speaking but eventually snap out of it and tell him that Private Kim Minjun is fighting all of the bats single-handedly without any equipment. Sergeant Lee, not caring, shouts at the recruits to deploy the shields. Meanwhile, Minjun is ripping through the bats one by one. He realizes it's taking too long and needs something to kill the bats faster. Sergeant Lee runs towards him, telling him to fall back. Minjun ignores him, wanting all the experience points. He notices Sergeant Lee has a baton in his hand, which catches Minjun's attention. Using his demonic energy on Sergeant Lee's stomach, Sergeant Lee thinks his stomach is acting up. Kim approaches, pretending to be worried, and asks to borrow the baton before taking it himself. He tells the sergeant he'll be back in a moment, his smile widening as he knows fun times are starting. Minjun rushes back into battle with the shock baton, ready to rip those middle bats apart, taking out multiple bats in one hit, and having an absolute blast. Sergeant Lee stands there, looking at Minjun with pure and filtered surprise. Minjun is overpowering every single one of those middle bats. Two soldiers carrying equipment notice a bat flying above them. The bat has a nasty look on its face, foaming with flames and its eyes glowing red with violence. Sergeant Lee orders the soldiers to fire at the bat, promising to take full responsibility if something happens. They aim their guns at the flying creature, but it suddenly stops and starts staring in confusion. Minjun, with a smile on his face and the shock baton in his hand, strikes quickly, overpowering the bat. Electricity crackles through the sky as Minjun's baton connects with the monster, leaving the squad below him wondering how he even got there. The troops successfully install the protective shield, and they all gather around it, collecting the middle bat corpses. Someone calls out to Sergeant Lee, who quickly salutes. It is the operations officer, Captain Yunchik. He tells Sergeant Lee he did a good job but asks where the middle bats even emerged from, as no one detected them on the radars. The captain reacts to the stench of the roasted bats and asks who barbecued those monsters and how many were killed. Sergeant Lee tells him it was a total of 30 bats. Wondering where the commander was, Sergeant Lee informs the captain that the battalion commander will be arriving soon. The captain acknowledges this, thinking how embarrassing it was that the captain was absent during an emergency. He asks Sergeant Lee if he was the one to roast the bats. Sergeant Lee denies this, knowing it had to be someone extremely skilled with the electric baton. The captain asks for the identity of the valiant fighter. Sergeant Lee tells him that all 30 bats were killed by a single soldier and to report it as such. The captain is shocked, unable to believe that every single middle bat was killed by just one individual. Minjun walks up behind them as they're talking and tells Sergeant Lee that he came to return the baton he borrowed, holding a broken baton with wires sticking out of it. He asks whether the baton was expensive because it sure isn't usable anymore after his exploits. Fighting the flying rodents, there's no wonder everyone is suspicious of Minjun. He had shown his strength publicly, and now all eyes are on him. In the battalion commander's office, Sergeant Lee seriously asks Minjun if he has re-enlisted. Minjun denies this but is then asked whether he's a regressor. He denies that as well. Sergeant Lee tells him never to do anything rash like this again, warning him that he might have been lucky this once, but luck won't always be on his side. Minjun thinks it wasn't luck but keeps his mouth shut. Sergeant Lee explains that Hunter Corps are a special unit, smaller in scale and scope with 4 battalions each, and fewer troops than in the regular military. Minjun realizes that not all the awakened keep enlisting but doesn't want to say it, fearing it will only draw more attention to him. With a patriotic fervor, Sergeant Lee asks Minjun if he knows how this all works. Minjun, looking like a lost puppy, doesn't reply. With passion and determination, Sergeant Lee tells Minjun that every single person in the Hunter Corps is awakened. Not all of them are fighters, many specialize in different fields like administration, tactics, weapons research, and monster theory. Minjun is surprised, having thought the entirety of the Hunter Corps was about fighting. Sergeant Lee clarifies that advancement is based on accomplishments, and one must be awakened to achieve them. Minjun looks up at Sergeant Lee, wondering why he's getting an exposition dump so early in the morning. Sergeant Lee tells him that if he expects something fun, then his expectations will come true. Minjun's eyes sparkled with anticipation. What did Sergeant Lee have in store for him? As we see a car driving towards HQ, we know someone important is coming. This isn't just any regular person. The car's number plate has two golden stars. The 104th Hunter Corps' resident celebrity was arriving, the hunter who had killed the most monsters out of anyone. A bearded man sits in the back of the car, looking like he's being driven around by Colonel Lee Jr. The car drives into the headquarters and stops. The door opens, and out steps a burly man. This deadly hunter was about to visit their battalion, and he probably had a whole lot to teach everyone about. Battalion Commander Lee Jinbeam salutes hard, yelling at the top of his lungs, while the smaller fry, the captains and others, sweat nervously, standing in the presence of the most terrifying Hunter Corps member in the world. The man approaches and shakes hands with none other than our boy, Sergeant Lee. Sergeant Lee is genuinely shocked, but appreciative that a man of such caliber is greeting him. Minjun, standing nearby, thinks this guy is quite lively and wonders how strong he is. Being a 2-star hunter from the Corps, he must be something special. The hunter walks up to Minjun, asking if he is Kim Min-yeon. Surprised, Minjun shakes hands out of courtesy, even though he doesn't care much about anyone. He immediately notices how strong the hunter's grip is. The hunter pats Minjun hard on the back and tells everyone to be at ease. The hunter asks if they figured out which gate the middle bats came from. The battalion commander replies that the gate was 1.2 kilometers north of the battalion headquarters on a hill, and they were already investigating the gate's rank and had restricted access to the area. The 2-star hunter instructs them to inform the division commander's office directly once the gate's rank is confirmed. He then inquires about their radar problem. A captain notes that the alarm had not gone off until the middle bats approached the battalion, but there was no equipment malfunction, so they were checking for blind spots. The hunter suggests it might have to do with the sheer numbers of the demons and advises reporting it to the divisional ordnance office to set up to more radars. The captain eagerly agrees, showing pure respect to this 2-star legend. Minjun, meanwhile, is having the time of his life watching everyone tense up. The hunter turns his attention to Minjun, praising his courage and quick response but advising more caution and equipment next time. Minjun apologizes, though internally he disagrees, thinking that if he had taken the time to get equipment, the battalion might have gone up in flames. It turns out the 2-star hunter is just joking. He's proud of Minjun for defeating the middle bats by himself, saying that if he hadn't reacted so fast, the old reserve would have exploded. The captains, wanting some appreciation but getting none, look on. The hunter then presents a gift from the division commander to Minjun, sticking a new rank insignia onto his chest. Minjun has finally achieved the rank upgrade he wanted. The 2-star hunter congratulates him on the advancement, stating that under regular circumstances, this wouldn't have happened so quickly, but exceptional soldiers should be rewarded promptly. Minjun is now Private First Class Kim Min-yeon. The hunter orders the battalion commander to give Minjun a vacation, 3 days and 2 nights of relaxation. Minjun is slightly shaken by the rapid advancement, but the vacation makes him really happy. He can now vibe in the PC room without any exceptions. Military life is getting more exciting by the minute. As Minjun and Captain Kim walk through the hallway, the captain shows his appreciation, glad Minjun accomplished so much and got commended. Minjun thanks him, saying he's just as joyous. The captain asks what Minjun plans to do outside the HQ, noting it's his first time going home after enlisting. Minjun has no idea, this is uncharted territory for him. The scene switches to the bustling city streets, lights and banners everywhere, cars on the roads, and people walking around. Minjun walks with a pep in his step, but the first thing he wants to do is find a PC room. He plans to play Dungeon Power Fighter there, not wanting to go home because of the restricted area and lack of internet connection. He intends to spend the next 3 days and 2 nights in the PC room without wasting time traveling. As he walks into the PC room, he hears a commotion behind him. 2 friends are talking, one feeling wronged by the soldiers. The other asks if he went to that cave again, and the first guy mentions he was there to pick mushrooms, angry about being stopped despite having permission and depositing money. They discuss how the mountain smelled foul with toxicity, causing headaches. Minjun, eavesdropping, asks them where the place is. Nervously, they decide to tell him and eventually drop him off near a place called Hukken, a restricted area. Minjun thanks them for the ride. One of the guys asks if Minjun can resolve whatever is on the mountain. Minjun, with determination, assures them the restriction will be lifted by tomorrow and they'll be able to go there again. They notice his private first-class stripes and drive off quickly. Minjun looks up at the mountain, sensing the demonic energy radiating from within. He decides to spend his vacation investigating this instead of staying in the PC room. Near the cave entrance, guards wearing gas masks protect the area because of the overwhelming demonic energy. Minjun hides between trees, noting the heavy security. He gestures, sending a wave of demonic energy towards the guards. They breathe it in, feeling their stomachs hurting. They decide they need a potty break, thinking no one would come here anyway. The entrance was now empty, with no security at the cave's opening whatsoever. Minjun started walking into the caves, slowly placing one foot in front of the other. As soon as he entered, he saw the place glistening with demonic energy, which put a smile on his face. However, there was one problem. When he placed his hand on the ground to sense anything in the area, he couldn't detect any monsters whatsoever. Minjun wondered why the demon energy was so dense in this cave if there weren't any monsters. As he ventured deeper, he realized it didn't matter if there were no monsters. All he wanted was that sweet, demonic energy. He began to absorb it all, the demonic energy flowing into his palm, giving him the power he craved so much. His stats were increasing, rising steadily with every moment. He looked at the notification window that appeared in front of him. He had now reached the demon energy threshold, enhancing his skill called Corruption and unlocking a new skill called Nightwalker. Minjun was overjoyed. This was a phenomenal turn of events. Not only had he enhanced one of his skills, but he had also unlocked a brand new one. As he looked at the status window, he thought about the sheer amount of luck needed to get this for free. His strength, agility, and stamina were at 60 points, and his demonic energy was now at 15 points. He looked at his hand, feeling the power surging through him, free demonic energy and a usable skill without any effort. This was a major win. Nightwalker allowed him to summon a shadowy figure called the Nightwalker. He knew about this skill because he had used it a lot on his Icar card. Its specialty was assassinating targets from stealth, but there was one downside. The summon needed regular demonic energy to be maintained. He raised his arms, ready to show off his new powers, and ordered the Nightwalker to emerge. The little ghost that appeared was worth all the demonic energy he had to feed it. It might look cute, but the Nightwalker was more dangerous than anyone could anticipate. However, Minjun was shocked by how tiny the Nightwalker was. He was confused. Was this a dimension travel penalty? Was it because his demonic energy stat was too low? This tiny creature seemed weak, but then he realized its small size meant it could hide in shadows, making it a perfect assassin. 3 days and 2 nights passed quickly, and Minjun was back at HQ. As soon as he returned to the dorm, he mentioned his vacation to his comrades, who gathered around him, recognizing him as the guy who advanced in the shortest time to date. They noticed he also got a vacation from the division commander and a badge from the 2-star hunter. Minjun looked around and noticed someone familiar to whom he had brought a gift, his buddy Dongjin. He handed Dongjin the gift, which turned out to be a bottle of moisturizer. This was odd because soldiers were more known for roughing it out. Nonetheless, Dongjin was genuinely gleeful at the sight of it, thanking Minjun and saying he would really use it well. As their banter continued, Junbeat in special firearms training mocked their friendship, asking Minjun to bring him some Maxim magazines. However, Minjun had only brought some instant coffee with the same name. The guy accepted his Maxim packs with a sad and annoyed look, while Minjun and Dongjin joked about Minjun becoming a corporal one day. Now, a redhead entered the scene and mentioned he saw Minjun's name on the advancement examination list. Lackey noted that the application period for that was already over before Minjun even transferred. It hadn't even been a year since Minjun's enlistment, which meant he shouldn't qualify. Redhead surmised that it had to be the division commander who got him in, otherwise, it didn't make any sense. Minjun's comrades looked at each other, discussing how this could be possible. Now that he was a private first class, Minjun found himself at the center of attention. His comrades eagerly awaited his explanation. Minjun began to speak about the training commander who had made him a special offer. This commander, impressed by Minjun's exceptional abilities as a soldier, had sent him to the 104th Battalion on a special recommendation, keen to see him succeed. As Minjun recounted the story, he looked around for their reactions. His comrades' faces were filled with confusion, struggling to grasp the full meaning of his tale. Red had noted that Kim had come here to start the advancement exams a year in advance, calling him crazy for having the audacity to do so. Lackey pointed out that since Minjun was already a private first class, passing the advancement exam would promote him to corporal. The comrades discussed how, if he succeeded, Minjun might become the most terrifying new recruit in the 104th Battalion. Meanwhile, the actual corporal drowned his sorrows with his maxim, feeling overshadowed. Lackey mentioned that the advancement exam candidates would have an orientation followed by special weapons training. They predicted Minjun would endure a grueling week. As they left the room, they bantered about why they weren't taking the advancement exams themselves, despite being sergeants. Minjun pondered the specialty weapons training, wondering if it differed from special firearms training. Time skipped forward to the orientation for the hunter advancement examinations. The instructor began with a quick overview of how the exams would proceed. Minjun sat attentively, absorbing the information, while others, overconfident in their prior knowledge, barely paid attention. The instructor explained that the examination consisted of two parts, a written exam and a practical exam. The written portion was a basic test, straightforward and easy to understand. Minjun walked out of the orientation feeling confident. He remembered that the practical exam, which would test their stats, specialty weapon proficiency, and monster handling abilities, was what truly mattered. As he prepared for the challenges ahead, Minjun felt a surge of determination. The journey to becoming a corporal was just beginning, and he was ready to face whatever came his way. Kim Minjun knew he would pass the upcoming exam, but he couldn't help but wonder what perks awaited him for achieving a perfect score again. As he walked through the hallway, he decided to take a more serious approach to the examination. The sun rose, signaling the start of specialty weapons training, which involved close-quarters weapons like swords, throwing knives, daggers, maces, and other such implements. The instructor stood above them, ready to impart his knowledge. He ordered the privates and privates first class to pick only swords, and the cadets responded with a resounding acknowledgement. He then commanded the corporals to take their weapons and train far away, threatening dire consequences if they slacked off. Turning his attention back to the rookies, he promised to teach them the basics of swordsmanship from the Hunter Corps' manual but warned them not to follow the guidelines blindly. They needed to use them as a foundation to develop their own styles and adapt to any situation. The instructor's booming voice asked if they understood, and the rookies loudly agreed, knowing they had no other option. He then instructed them to follow his every move and concentrate solely on what he was doing. Even if a distraction as enticing as a naked girl stood to their left, their focus had to remain on him. He picked up a sword and demonstrated incredible moves, flowing like water as he jumped, swiped, dashed, ducked, and slashed. It was clear he had mastered the art of swordsmanship. The rookies stared in awe, and Minjun, in particular, noted the difference in this weapons training. He now understood why it was called specialty weapons training and felt a surge of joy at the prospect of showing off some moves. He knew that one couldn't always rely on rifles when fighting monsters. Honing his skills with a sword was crucial. While the rookies awkwardly swung their swords, revealing their subpar skill levels, Minjun made the air flow around him with his swordsmanship. He was already channeling the power of the specialty weapons, setting himself apart from his peers and proving his exceptional abilities once again. Minjun knew how this worked, while the rest struggled due to a lack of skill. As he swung his sword, he thought this training was better in Isgard. He leapt into the air, his movements so precise they seemed to tear through the very fabric of reality, stunning the rookies. To Minjun, technique was everything, and he effortlessly demonstrated his impressive swordsmanship. The instructor called for a halt and summoned Minjun to the podium. With a mix of curiosity and apprehension, Minjun walked towards the instructor, sword in hand and thoughts racing. The instructor addressed the rookies, criticizing their poor movements and lack of fluidity, and instructed them to take cues from Minjun. Minjun was taken aback. He knew he was good, but he hadn't expected such immediate praise. The instructor pulled out a stick and ordered everyone to follow Minjun's lead. Minjun demonstrated his skills again, each slash of his sword far more spectacular than anything the rookies could muster. The instructor repeatedly pointed out Minjun's technique, urging the rookies to emulate him. Minjun moved with grace and precision, his sword carving through the air before he landed on his knees, exhausted. The rookies stood in awe, unable to fathom replicating Minjun's performance. As Minjun sat, worn out from essentially serving as the de facto training instructor, the real instructor approached him. He praised Minjun for his performance and handed him something from his pocket, instructing him to eat it when he was alone. Minjun hoped it wasn't just an advertisement but thought, please pay me anyway. If it was. Now, he held a mysterious pack in his hand, courtesy of the instructor. As Minjun pondered whether the instructor always carried snacks, he glanced at the pack. Just as he was about to start eating, Dongjin appeared and asked Minjun to critique his form during the break. Hiding the packet given by the instructor, Minjun wondered why Dongjin sought his advice. Dongjin explained that his specialty weapon was the sword, but he struggled to fight monsters with it. He asked Minjun for pointers. Minjun, knowing this was his boy, his homie, agreed to help. Dongjin demonstrated his form, performing quite well with the sword, while Minjun leaned against the wall, snacking on the chocolate sandwich and observing. Minjun noted that Dongjin's movements weren't the problem, it was something deeper. Private First Class Lee Dongjin's issue was confidence, something Minjun recognized from his own time in Isgard. Minjun knew that Dongjin would eventually transform into a top-tier hunter with the right guidance. He felt confident that he could help his friend gain the confidence needed to excel in combat. The chapter ended with anticipation for the advancement examination. At HQ, everyone was relaxing in various ways, some watching TV, others playing basketball or board games. Suddenly, an announcement blared from the speakers, instructing all hunters scheduled for the advancement examinations to proceed to the military training ground immediately. Everyone was caught off guard by the news, except for Minjun, who stood ready and determined. He knew that today was the day he would become a corporal. The sun shone on the young examinees' faces as they gathered at the military training grounds. The instructor for the exam, Second Lieutenant Kim Chi, because everyone is either Kim or Lee in this series, introduced himself as their guide through the exam. He began by checking the number of personnel from each company. As the examinees listened attentively, a bus pulled up, signaling that the exam would be held elsewhere. The second lieutenant stood by, checking off names as everyone boarded in an orderly fashion. Once everyone was seated, he announced that the exam would take place at the 105th Division. As the bus took off, he instructed the examinees to review their practice questions during the journey. The atmosphere was tense, with many feeling flustered. Minjun, eavesdropping on a conversation between two examinees, overheard them discussing how the 4th Battalion was also attending the advancement exams. This meant they would finally see some female participants in the series. One examinee was particularly excited about showcasing his weapon's proficiency in front of the girls, hoping they might ask for his number. Minjun listened and laughed to himself, confident in his own abilities and amused by their enthusiasm. The bus ride to the 105th Division was scenic, with beautiful vistas lining the route. The military establishment's perimeters were evident upon arrival, showcasing tight security and discipline. The scene then shifted to written examination room number 7. The examinees had completed their written tests and were anxiously awaiting their results. Invigilator Kong announced that everyone had passed, except for Cho Jian-wook, the same guy who had been bragging about impressing the girls. The room erupted in laughter as Cho Jian-wook began to sweat nervously, realizing he wouldn't get to show off his skills. Outside the examination room, his friends teased him mercilessly for failing an exam deemed easier than a driver's license test. Meanwhile, Minjun remained unfazed, vibing on his own and enjoying the moment. He was confident and ready for whatever came next, knowing that this was just another step towards his goal of becoming a corporal. Everybody was walking in a straight line, ready for the physical exam. A familiar face appeared among the crowd, a blue-haired woman staring at the examinees as they entered a beautiful building at the 105th Division. Inside the auditorium, a speech was underway, given by Lieutenant Colonel Lee Cheolji, the man in charge of the advancement exam. He applauded the examinees for making it this far, emphasizing that the objective was not only to find worthy candidates for promotion but also to foster friendly competition between 3 different divisions. Minjun, feeling sleepy and impatient for the exam to start, perked up when Lieutenant Colonel Lee mentioned special exceptions. Lee called out Minjun's name, along with another name, Private Sun Yoon, the blue-haired girl. He noted that these two had enlisted a year ago but had already shown exceptional talent. Minjun was excited to learn that there was someone else special like him. The nerds in the audience were the only ones paying close attention to Lee's speech. They discussed how applying to the front lines could lead to special exceptions and how many people had rejected offers to join the 104th Division. They speculated that if they hadn't, they could be like Minjun, who had already become a private first class. Their excitement grew as they whispered about Minjun's accomplishments, and their chatter turned heads, even drawing the attention of the blue-haired girl. Minjun noticed Sun looking at him. When their eyes met, she quickly turned away. Minjun pretended not to notice, though he had clearly caught her gaze. Lieutenant Colonel Lee continued his speech, telling everyone to do their best, though it seemed like few were listening. Finally, someone more practical took the stage, Captain Jong Sanchan. He announced the commencement of the tests for strength, agility, and stamina. The first test was for strength, which was straightforward. All they had to do was push back the examiner, a hulking figure named Dave Bautista. The challenge ahead was clear, and Minjun was ready to prove himself once again. Minjun remembered a previous exam where he had to push a huge redstone and wondered why all these tests were so similar. They had only a minute to complete this task, and if they managed to move Dave Bautista 10 meters backward, they would get the highest score on a 100-point scale. The examinees sat in front of the 10-meter squares marked on the ground, called up one by one to try their luck. First up was Private Kim from the 103rd Division. This guy was bulky, with a tight t-shirt showing off his muscles. He walked up to Dave Bautista and grabbed his shoulder, pushing with all his might. But Dave, solid as a rock, didn't budge. Kim's face turned red from the effort, almost as if he were giving birth, but a simple shoulder tap from Dave sent him flying, disqualified. The invigilator reminded everyone that a score below 40 meant immediate disqualification. The rest of the examinees were visibly nervous after witnessing Kim's defeat. One by one, they were swatted away by Dave, earning dismal scores of 10 or 20 before being disqualified. The invigilator was growing frustrated with their incompetence. Finally, it was time for someone interesting, Sun Yoon, the blue-haired girl. Despite her nervous sweat, she managed to pass. Though it would have been nice to see her exact performance, it was clear she scored 50 points, moving Dave 5 meters back. Everyone was shocked. This frail-looking girl had accomplished what they couldn't. She walked away confidently, the epitome of a girl boss, while the boys were awestruck by her beauty and rumored nepotism as the division commander's daughter. She judged them silently as she walked through the crowd of admirers, except for Minjun, who remained disinterested. However, Minjun was thinking about her too, how she was the only other person with a special exception like him. Now, it was his turn. The time had come for him to showcase his incredible strength. Minjun announced his arrival, mentioning his private first-class title as he confidently stepped forward towards Dave Bautista. Minjun had a plan. He knew he couldn't treat this situation like the redstone test because if he did, Dave Bautista would die. But if he could push him past the 10-meter mark, he might get a special bonus. With both hands front and center, all 5 fingers open, Minjun pushed hard and brash. Dave Bautista went flying. No one in his entire life had ever pushed him this far. The crowd was shocked. Their faces went white with envy and fear. Thankfully, Bautista managed to land on his feet. He wasn't just bulky like a bear, he was nimble like a cat. His feet dragged along the ground, leaving behind broken wood chips. Bautista was both shocked and enraged, and even the invigilator had no idea how this was possible. Private First Class Kim Minjun was the only person who managed to acquire 100 points. He smiled, knowing this was coming, but no one else had any clue, not even the blue-haired Nepo baby. As Minjun walked away, feeling the sun's gaze, he realized there weren't any bonus points after all. Minjun wasn't the final examinee. More were yet to be disqualified. A girl was sent away crying because she failed to push Dave Bautista more than 1 meter. The rest of the examinees stood there, wondering why this was so difficult. The strength test had finally ended, and it was time for the next one, the agility test. The agility test started without any breaks. Those who were disqualified walked off disappointed with their performances. Meanwhile, the staff was changing up the equipment and bringing in new stuff for the agility test. They set up a big green net and struggled a bit with it. Then they brought in a huge minigun. It looked like an anti-tank weapon, but it was just a big minigun for the agility test. The examinees were terrified, wondering if they were going to be made to dodge bullets after using up so much strength trying to push the behemoth, Dave Bautista. The invigilator laughed as he finally revealed they would indeed be dodging rubber bullets. It didn't matter if they were rubber bullets. They were being shot out at an unprecedented pace from what seemed like an anti-tank weapon. In other words, it would still hurt like a bullet. He told them to dodge everything, and they started looking as nervous as cats in a room full of rocking chairs. Minjun found this amusing and couldn't help but smirk at how interesting things had gotten. The man operating the gun looked like he was ready for a wild game of dodgeball, but with bullets. The goal was to dodge the bullets for a full minute. If they managed to last without getting hit, they'd score a perfect 10. Of course, they had to stay within the designated area inside the net. Adding to their fear was the fact that they could also pass by tanking the hits for a minute. They just had to endure it. Anyone who dashed out of the net in under 30 seconds or got seriously injured would be disqualified on the spot. Minjun heard a familiar voice behind him. As it called out to him, he turned in surprise. It was none other than his buddy, Private First Class Dongjin, grinning and waving like he just won the lottery. Minjun was shocked to see him there. He had no clue Dongjin had aced the strength test. Dongjin asked why he was so surprised. Did Minjun really think his buddy was going to flunk the strength test? Minjun denied it, though secretly, he kind of did. Come on, you probably did too. Dongjin explained that all the private first classes had passed the advancement exam before, so they were a bit used to the format. The only catch was that the score standards were higher for them, which is why Dongjin had been struggling. He gave Minjun a tip, saying that these rubber bullets flew just as fast as real ones, so dodging based on eyesight wasn't the way to go. As the bullets zipped out of the gun at lightning speed, he emphasized the importance of predicting their path and dodging accordingly. The bullets started flying, and the military training grounds erupted with screams. The first bullet hit a guy's skull, cracking it open and making him bleed. He collapsed, crying out in pain. Naturally, he was immediately disqualified, and an examiner escorted him to the infirmary. Minjun noticed a lot of people were getting disqualified just from the stat tests. Maybe that's why the pass rate was so low. But it made sense. The real monsters out there were much scarier than any test could prepare them for. Another examinee was disqualified for bolting out of the safety net, not wanting to get hit by the bullets. The invigilator was not having it. He called them cowards, reminding them that this test was a walk in the park compared to the sergeant advancement exam happening next door. People walked away disappointed and nervous about their performances. But hey, these tests were brutal, so let's cut them some slack. Not that they know I exist, I'm just a random narrator here. Eventually, someone interesting stepped up. It was none other than Private Sun Yoon, the blue-haired Nepo baby. She walked up to the safety net, cracking her fingers and ready for action. The bullets flew, and the crowd watched in anticipation, a bit nervous for her. They should have known better. She was leagues ahead of them. She dodged bullets like Neo from the Matrix, jumping, dodging, dashing, dancing, doing whatever it took to avoid the onslaught. The crowd was in awe. As the clock hit 57 seconds, even the invigilator applauded her. The 60 seconds finally passed, and Sun Yoon hadn't been hit once. She nailed a perfect score. As she walked past the crowd, everyone stared, amazed by her skill. She passed Minjun, giving him a mean look. He stared back, confused. The rest of the examinees speculated if they were dating, because why else would she look at him like that? She stepped slowly, staring deeply into Minjun's eyes, leaving him wondering what she wanted. Thankfully, the tension was broken by the invigilator announcing that it was Minjun's turn to bite the bullet or dodge it. He quickly turned away from her and walked towards the safety net. She still stared at him while walking away. "Guys, this tension is killing me." Minjun used his peripheral vision to see that she was still staring at him, making him a bit uncomfortable. Standing in front of the safety net, he wondered what she wanted. Was she expecting a compliment? But why, when they didn't even know each other? Lost in thought, he didn't realize the gun was primed and ready. The chamber went off, and the bullet zoomed towards him like a meteor. He quickly dodged it, moving his head away. The bullet was too slow for our hero. Sun was impressed. She saw him as a rival, but his skill was far ahead of hers. With his hands still in his pockets, Minjun decided to showcase his prowess to his blue-haired rival. As the bullets rained in, everyone was baffled. How was he doing this? Minjun effortlessly dodged every bullet with subtle, almost imperceptible movements. No jumps, no dash, just elegant curves of his body, closing the gap between himself and the gun. He got so close that bullets whizzed past his face. He grinned at his rival, who looked utterly shocked and nervous. Meanwhile, Minjun continued to evade bullets, staring at her and chuckling. He was really getting under her skin. The invigilator was dumbfounded, forgetting to even check the time. It turned out the gun had been firing for a minute and 10 seconds before he called for a ceasefire. The bullet storm ceased, and Minjun stood just 2 steps away from the gun barrel. He had truly shown off today. Even if he didn't impress the ladies, though, he definitely scared them. The invigilator, unsure how to react, simply awarded Minjun a perfect score on the agility test and moved on to the next contestant, trying to regain his composure. With the agility test done and the afternoon wearing on, the remaining examinees were called together in front of a large blue portal gate. The invigilator, sweating profusely from the heat, praised their performance in the agility test and then announced the start of the stamina stat test. This final test seemed straightforward: race through the transforming dungeon beyond the big blue portal gate within 40 minutes. The catch: no one knew how far they had to march to reach the examiner at the turning point where they'd get their stamp. As Minjun marched with the other examinees, he wondered if they were all pacing themselves, given they had just begun. He started to contemplate whether he might get in trouble for sprinting ahead. He was getting bored of the slow pace. Just then, someone tapped his shoulder and breezed past him. It was none other than the blue-haired nepotism baby dart past him, zooming ahead like a caffeinated squirrel. She glanced back, locking eyes with him, as he wondered what she wanted this time. Then it hit him: it was a race now. She bolted forward, and everyone else followed like it was the last call at a buffet. The long march had transformed into a long race, which made sense given the 40-minute time limit. Minjun was hit with a surge of excitement as he realized she had just thrown down the gauntlet. Our boy wasn't one to back down from a challenge. The blue-haired girl sprinted ahead, taking the lead. She looked back at our hero, daring him to keep up. He immediately caught on and burst out laughing, knowing she was challenging him. The game was afoot, and the race was on. It was going to be a trek to the finish line, and Minjun had no intention of losing. He started running faster than a soldier who heard the mess hall was serving steak. He surged ahead of the competition, leaving them in his dust. They could only watch and yell for him to wait, but Minjun had one goal: to beat the blue-haired girl. The dungeon was rocky, and the fog made visibility a joke, but the blue-haired girl was determined. She wanted to win as badly as everyone else. Suddenly, she noticed something behind her. It was like a shadow was on her tail. Nope, it was just Minjun, grinning as he easily caught up. He told her this wasn't going to be too difficult for him. Confused, She asked what he meant. He just replied that he was talking to himself. Then, he dashed ahead, leaving her baffled by his incredible speed. He laughed hysterically, showing off as he took the lead. She stood there, panting, and wondered what kind of superhuman she was up against. Her mind wandered back to when she left the battalion commander's office and was swarmed by reporters. Time for Sun Yunseo's backstory. She wasn't used to all this attention. They bombarded her with questions about her meeting with the commander and if the rumors were true that she was a general's daughter with insane stats. She didn't know how to respond. It felt like too much responsibility. As she walked away, she heard whispers about her being a nepotism baby but still normal and not too arrogant. They didn't know much about her. As she walked away, she heard them speculate that she was going to be the best recruit of the year. She took off her jacket. Still in the flashback, by the way, she thought about our hero and how he smashed the redstone in one hit. She was impressed and curious about his strength. The scene switched to a training center where an announcer declared that the white team had won. What did they win? Let's find out. Sun was on a catwalk, waving a blue flag in her training attire, smiling as sweat dripped down her face. She made her way off the catwalk and rejoined her team to celebrate. The announcer shouted that the blue team's flag was captured by the white team, setting a new record of 3 minutes and 34 seconds. He told the white team to take a 10-minute break and called the blue team over as another trainer approached the white team. She told the girls they'd set a new record for the training center and that they could rest for now. The girls were thrilled, basking in their accomplishment. Her team celebrated while resting, proud of their comrade, Sun Yunseo, for single-handedly winning the training. Sun, not one to take compliments easily, blushed but had a faint smile, as anyone would when receiving unexpected praise. Later, we find ourselves back in the girls' locker room, where the women were engaged in various activities, some changing, others reading books, folding clothes, or scrolling through their phones. Suddenly, a short-haired blonde girl burst in, almost knocking the door off its hinges. She announced with great urgency that the record they set for capture the flag in the morning had been broken in the afternoon training. The girls were puzzled. How could such a record even be made? Turns out, it was none other than Kim Minjun, RMC, who had shattered it, finishing in just 1 minute and 2 seconds. This immediately caught Sun Yunseo's attention. She remembered the guy who had bested her without breaking a sweat. In the girls' shower, the atmosphere was more relaxed, but Minjun's name was on everyone's lips. This was during the time when he got a near-perfect score shooting the ICM bullets, and Sun Yunseo was getting increasingly annoyed by his constant record-breaking performances. Blondie kept bringing up Minjun during every activity or training session, and Sun had had enough. Even at midnight, when they were supposed to be sleeping, Blondie wouldn't stop talking about how he caught a hound the size of an elephant in the dungeon. Finally, Sun snapped, "Blondie, if you don't stop talking about Minjun, I'm going to set a new record for most pillows thrown at someone's head." Blondie, however, seemed to be in a Minjun-induced trance, unable to stop talking about him. Sun just wanted some peace. Eventually, she zoned out into a sleep filled with memories of her past.
Flashback.
A solemn figure was tying the laces on their boots. They had rough hands, the hands of a seasoned soldier. It was a bulky figure, the physique of a man who had seen many battles. A little girl approached him. It was none other than Sun herself as a child. The man was her father, a veteran of the Hunter Corps. She looked up to him with admiration, and in her dream, she stared at him while the background remained completely white and colorless. He was a huge source of joy for Sun, and his smile brought her happiness. He gave her a pat on the head, messing up her hair affectionately. As he left through the door, she watched him with yearning, not wanting him to go. In that moment, a small smile appeared on her face as she knew exactly what her goal in life was going to be. She was going to become strong, just like her father. She was going to keep everyone safe and make a name for herself as a powerful soldier in the Hunter Corps. And just like that, we're back in the battalion commander's office. He complimented her on the phenomenal training she'd been doing for the past 4 weeks. He had called her into his office to discuss something important and asked if that would be all right. She thanked him for his consideration and wanted to know more about what he wanted to discuss. He asked where she wanted to apply, telling her that with her exceptional grades, she could be dispatched to any division she chose. It was like standing in a candy store, but instead of candies, these were military headquarters. She just had to pick her favorite. She thought about her answer as the battalion commander insisted on knowing where she wanted to go. Did she want to be near her father or somewhere else? She simply mentioned the name of our hero, Kim Minjun. This left the battalion commander puzzled, trying to understand what she meant. He chuckled, "Well, if you're looking for more broken records, I guess you've found the right guy." She decided to clarify things. After taking a deep breath, she asked the commander, which division did recruit Kim Minjun apply to? "Because that's going to be my poison of choice." And just like that, we're back to the race. Sun Yunseo is running, splashing her feet through muddy water. She remembered she didn't apply to this division just to have childish competitions with fellow recruits. As she tried to gain more momentum, she realized she provoked Minjun because she was a little upset. Maybe that's why he was mad and showing off. In her mind, he was her main rival during this assessment. He bested her each time they competed, first during the strength stat test and then during the agility test. Realizing her errors, she knew her jealousy had gotten the better of her. Determined to run faster, she noted she would apologize to him first. The goal was clear. She wanted to become stronger. She never intended to be number one. She came here to get stronger without her father's help. Making enemies was not part of the plan. She knew she had encountered someone extremely skillful and, instead of being her rival, he should be someone she learns from. She wasn't going to be childish anymore. As she reached her destination, the turning point stamp validation booth, Yunseo noticed Minjun had already gotten there. The man in charge of the stamps kept telling him to go away, but he stood there just to show her he got there first. As he ran past her from the turning point, he teased, "I almost fell asleep waiting for the slowpoke that you are." This embarrassed her, and the embarrassment quickly turned into rage. He had pissed her off real good this time. She started yelling at the invigilator to stamp her quickly because she wanted to get back in the race. As she dashed away from the turning point, she decided to forget the apologies. The very sight of Minjun's face enraged her so much she wanted revenge. And fortunately for her, when they emerged from the portal, they were all tired beyond expression. Of course, Minjun was just having fun. This was just another day at the office for him. The invigilator announced that Private First Class Kim Minjun was in first place with a record of 29 minutes. On the other hand, Private Sun Yunseo, the blue-haired Nepo baby, was in second place with 32 minutes. The invigilator congratulated Minjun, telling him he got a perfect score in every single stat test. Minjun thanked the invigilator, happy to just be there. That was the end of the stat tests. Every single hunter who passed would get to eat a delicious meal and then gather in front of the training grounds for more assessment action. All the hunters yelled out an acknowledgement, showing their enthusiasm, even though they were so tired they could fall on the ground. They picked their jackets off the ground as it was time to head back for lunch. For a brief moment, our hero made eye contact with the blue-haired woman. Instead of being mature, Minjun stuck out his tongue and taunted her more. Sun was no longer annoyed, just embarrassed at this point. As he walked away, a familiar face found him. It was none other than Lee Dongjin, who told him he was being rude. Meanwhile, Sun just stood there watching. Her harassment and anger had completely died out as she giggled a little. She realized she was the one who fell for the provocation and, on top of that, she also lost. She didn't have anything else to say anymore. She just looked up at the sky and smiled, knowing there was good competition here. She could feel the cold breeze of the air touching her skin. It was almost as if she walked into heaven after emerging from hell, feeling refreshed as her sweat dried off. She straightened her head, preparing herself for the next assessment that was about to take place, and moved towards the rest of the group for a hearty meal after the tough stat tests she had gone through. After they had finished eating, it was time for the second practical examinations to start. At the examination center, we see a wooden club slam into the ground as it seems that the second practical examinations had already begun. There were a bunch of goblins standing around a lone fighter. The hunter had a sword in his hand and had already slain one of them. One of the goblins roared out loud, its yellow eyes piercing through and causing terror. The other goblin started laughing maniacally. It wanted to engage but was scared. The corpse of a dead green goblin sullied the ground, its tar-like blood splattered all over the place. The hunter was none other than Private First Class Lee Dongjin. He wiped the sweat off his forehead as he got ready to take on more of those ugly creatures. He looked at them, analyzing their movements so that he could mark his target. A blue goblin lunged towards the Private First Class. However, Dongjin was prepared. As he maneuvered his sword, he didn't expect both goblins to attack at the same time. The other one started moving behind him as well, and he was about to be caught in a pincer attack if he didn't make a decisive move. He quickly turned his eyes towards the blue goblin, knowing exactly what to do. He immediately blocked the blue goblin's wooden club from turning his face into pulp using his incredibly strong katana. Then he used his foot to kick the goblin in its chest, giving it a pretty good heartache and sending it flying far away. In the meantime, the green goblin had made its way behind him. But Private First Class Dongjin was prepared for any attacks coming his way. He moved out of the way of the club attack, barely managing to save himself from any damage. The counterattack was brutal as he slashed the goblin through the chest, carving into it as a fountain of blood started to spurt out of its cut-open upper body. Yet somehow, that evil little creature managed to land on its feet. Dongjin was annoyed, but most of all, he was frustrated that his sword swipe didn't kill it. The goblin was angry now, its irises turned red as the carved-up chest kept leaking blood. Both goblins were now standing in the same place, and they could overwhelm him if they decided to attack together again. As this fight was going on, our hero was looking at it from above and spectating. He stood up on a balcony in a spectator area where people could watch the assessment from afar without putting themselves in danger or confusing the goblins about their target. Basically, the second part of the practical exam was called the Specialty Weapons Proficiency, and it was way simpler than what our hero had expected. All they had to do was display the techniques they had learned in the hunter course to the examiners. That was essentially the whole test, and it didn't matter how strong their moves were. All they had to do was follow the manuals in order to pass. Most of the applicants had chosen swordsmanship as their specialty. While our hero had gotten a perfect score, his buddy, Private First Class Lee Dongjin, ended up receiving a very high score as well. The invigilator congratulated him and was proud of what the Private First Class had managed to do. Yet something was lingering on his mind, and that was the main combat itself. As Dongjin struggled during the combat, it seemed that his fears had been realized. Minjun expected that his homie would struggle during the combat because that was one of his weaknesses in general. Goblins were closing in on Dongjin, as this was the last part of the practical exam known as the ability to handle monsters. People would spectate from above as a hunter would have to defeat for hounds. However, since Dongjin was a private first class, he had to defeat 3 goblins while wielding his chosen specialty weapon. As the goblins closed in, Dongjin managed to cut the green one in half, slicing through it like butter. Now, only the blue one remained, and it wasn't going to be much trouble alone. The splash of blood poured out of the blue goblin as it fell to the ground, breathing its last breath. Dongjin stood above it with the sword pointing downwards as he was about to stab it through the chest and end its life. He pushed the sword down, cutting through the skin, bone, and muscle tissue to pierce the goblin's heart. The invigilator announced that it took our boy a total of 7 minutes and 52 seconds to finish the ability to handle monsters test. I guess this wasn't a good enough number because instead of saying anything else, they just told him to return to his seat. The poor guy looked quite disappointed in himself, drenched in sweat, huffing and puffing from exhaustion as he walked away. He knew his performance wasn't as good as he wanted it to be. Minjun, still spectating, noted that his buddy had many opportunities to kill the goblins, but hesitated each time. He would either fall back or keep defending himself by guarding with his sword, and at times he would also get overwhelmed instead of attacking. Minjun wondered if his boy had no confidence in his abilities, but he did not want to make any assumptions. Dongjin emerged through the gates with his head down in disappointment. he felt as if he had let himself down. He walked past our hero, still feeling depressed after that subpar performance. Now it was the turn for our hero to show off his ability to handle monsters, and no matter what happened today, he was determined to become a corporal. He had confidence in himself and was determined to help his homie build confidence in his abilities too. The other examinees stood by in shock, looking at their fellow hunter as it seemed he had made a weird choice. Even the examiner and Sun Yunxio, the blue-haired nepotism baby, were shocked by his choice. It was a black baseball bat, not just a regular one, but one with nails poking out at the head. Yup, our hero had chosen a baseball bat with nails as his specialty weapon for this test. The examiner was confused, assuming Minjun had picked a tough weapon for the ability to handle monsters test. However, our hero had a smirk on his face because he knew the one thing needed for such a test was something he already possessed: sheer confidence. As the gates opened and the 3 goblins emerged from within, our hero was ready. He knew that all he needed was some powerful impact. Smiling confidently, the goblins immediately began to rush towards him. The fat one was barreling towards him while the green ones were jumping around like monkeys. But Minjun just stood there nonchalantly, not worrying about anything. He gripped the baseball bat as hard as he could, making the veins on his hand pop. In his mind, these goblins were nothing but frail little rabbits. He swung his bat at an impressive pace. Imagine thinking you're a hawk, ready to snatch up rabbits with just a flick of your talons. That's exactly how Minjun saw himself. As the goblins charged at him, his bat swung with the precision of a hawk's dive. These goblins weren't your run-of-the-mill monsters. They were brimming with bloodlust, brandishing heavy clubs, but in one swift motion, Minjun's bat made them disappear faster than a magician's rabbit. For seconds, that's all it took. While others took minutes, Minjun reduced the goblins to bite-sized pieces of demon meat. The examiners, jaw-dropping disbelief. Perfect scores in every practical exam, check. Goblins obliterated in one hit. Check. The other hunters erupted in cheers, but the main examiner and Sun Yunxio stood in stunned silence. Minjun looked up, grinning at Sun Yunxio, who was trying to fathom what had just happened. Minjun, arms raised in triumph, knew he was the most powerful hunter to ever grace this assessment. As the applause died down, Sun Yunxio was left pondering what kind of reckless genius Minjun was. Evening fell, and the exam was officially over. The hunters gathered outside, near the buses that had brought them there. The examiner congratulated everyone but had a special nod for Minjun's stellar performance. Minjun was about to introduce himself as Private First Class but remembered his promotion to Corporal. The examiner laughed, tapping his shoulder. "You're moving up so fast, you're forgetting your rank," he chuckled. Despite being the only one from their battalion to advance, the battalion commander was thrilled. Everyone crowded around Minjun, congratulating him on his promotion. They joked that if he hadn't passed, their squad would face some serious teasing back home. They also warned him not to become a bully when he reached sergeant, given his rapid ascent. Minjun was elated. His swift rise left no door closed. As they boarded the bus, Minjun noticed his friend Dongjin's disappointed expression. A pat on the shoulder reassured Dongjin that Minjun hadn't changed despite his new rank. But Minjun, being the rascal he is, had grand plans for dungeon training with the specialty weapons. On the bus, the other hunters eyed Minjun with curiosity. Sun Yunxio, determined to apologize, finally approached him. With a Private First Class tag on her pocket, she had also advanced. She had excelled in handling monsters and was his closest competition during the exams. Time was short, and Minjun boarded the bus, taking his seat. Outside, the evening sky was a picturesque palette of colors. But Sun Yunxio stood there, resembling a lost puppy. She mustered the courage to apologize, but as she began to speak, her eyes widened. Minjun had his face squished against the glass window like a kid in a candy store. Minjun pointed at his lips, signaling Sun Yunxio to focus on his words. "Don't ever provoke me again," he stated boldly, adding a dash of drama to his already impressive performance. Though he didn't mean it literally, the sheer audacity of his statement left Sun Yunxio in shock. The bus roared away, kicking up a trail of dust as it sped off into the evening light. As she watched it disappear, she realized just how wild and unpredictable Minjun was. It seemed like he'd just slammed the door on any budding romance, but Inseo's respect for him only grew. Who knows, maybe their paths will cross again soon. Cut to the next episode. The bus speeds away from a bewildered Sun Yenseo. Although we don't see her, Minjun's clear message to buzz off lingers. As the bus hits the freeway and settles into a smooth ride, Minjun braces himself for the onslaught of questions from his comrades. They swarm him like bees, buzzing with curiosity about Sun Yunseo's lingering stares and interest during the tests. What's the deal? Why was she so focused on him? Minjun, cornered and with nowhere to hide, decides honesty is the best policy. She provoked me, so I showed her who's boss during the tests, he explains. The guys are flabbergasted, jaws dropping in surprise before they bombard him with more questions. They argue that her looks were anything but provocative, more like smitten, if anything. Like a pack of wolves, they surround him, miffed that he didn't seize the chance to get close to the hottest recruit in the 104th Division. She was the dream girl of many soldiers, and they couldn't believe he let the opportunity slip by. Minjun, visibly annoyed, declares, "She's not my dream girl. This only fuels their curiosity. If not her, then who is his dream girl?" Minjun leaned back and dropped a name that left everyone scratching their heads. Lumi. Who the heck is Lumi? The guys chorused. Minjun dived into an impassioned description, reminiscing about Lumi, the most beautiful woman in all of Dungeon Power Fighter. Her beauty was unparalleled, and he was genuinely shocked they didn't know about her. Their puzzled faces turned to annoyed smirks as they realized Minjun was obsessing over a video game character. But no matter, these conversations led nowhere because they were heading back to the training center, where life returned to the usual grind, devoid of any girls. Back at the center, celebrations were in full swing. Empty boxes of chicken wings littered the place. It was clear they had a chicken wing feast. The boys were chomping away like monsters at an all-you-can-eat buffet. Just as they thought the food was done, the lieutenant walked in with more. "Eat as much as you want today," he declared. Redhead and his lackey were pleasantly surprised by the lieutenant's generosity, guessing he was in an exceptionally good mood. The lackey gave Minjun a thumbs up, assuming it was all thanks to him. Redhead grinned at Minjun, thrilled and impressed that Minjun had already earned 3 stars. He even suggested Minjun had the potential to become a sergeant soon. Minjun just kept sipping his Pepsi, playing it cool. Suddenly, the door swung open. Would this disrupt the party? In walked Lee Jun, holding a big crate of beer. The party was just getting started. He called for all members of the second squad to gather in the lounge. The second squad boys jumped up immediately, while others looked on curiously. Lee Seung-ho strutted in, looking like he'd just won the lottery. After I reported the squad's dinner to the administration, it was like Christmas had come early, he declared. He made sure to mention Minjun's perfect score on the advancement exam in his report. As Minjun sipped his soda, he braced himself for the inevitable toast. Redhead and lackey's eyes lit up when they saw the crate Lee Seung-ho was carrying. I mean, who wouldn't want a taste of alcohol in a soldier's camp? Lee Seung-ho, ever the brash one, told them to back off. The drinks were for Minjun and the second squad, not for a couple of greedy looky-loos. The room's mood soured as Redhead and lackey left, the crowd muttering curses and hoping they choked on their disappointment. Redhead was especially irked, suspecting that Lee Seung-ho knew about Minjun's skills all along, which is why Minjun was placed in his squad. Whether or not that was true, Redhead wasn't getting drunk tonight. As the day wound down and the full moon bathed the HQ in silver light, Minjun decided to take a nighttime stroll. The street lights cast long shadows, making it the perfect time for a bit of solitude. He wandered to the back of the building, checking his surroundings to ensure he was alone. Clearing his throat, he prepared to summon something. "Emerge," he commanded, his hand gesturing to bring forth some of that demonic energy. From the dark, a puppet began to take shape, looking almost like a character from a Gratsuko come to life. Minjun couldn't help but smile at its adorable appearance. He asked the puppet how it had been, and it responded by happily swatting at a fly. Though Minjun was initially wary of how harmless the puppet seemed, he had plans to make it more useful. He didn't need it to be an assassin just yet. He had a different role in mind. As Minjun instructed the puppet to gather information like a covert agent, the puppet seemed more interested in its new fly toy. Suddenly, a loud and annoyed voice cut through the night. Minjun turned his head sharply, causing the puppet to jump in surprise. The night was about to get even more interesting. He told the puppet, "We'll call you Tiny from now on, so stop messing around and follow anyone who seems high-ranking." He wanted Tiny to gather information about any unusual occurrences, especially if they were related to demonic energy. Tiny put his hand out, asking his master for something in return for his loyalty. Perhaps Minjun realized Tiny was simply asking for permission to go. He formed a small vortex of demonic energy in his hand and approached his minion. Handing off the small vortex to Tiny, the puppet took it eagerly and dashed away in the opposite direction once he got a hold of the demonic energy. Minjun called out after him, "Be cautious and don't get caught." As Tiny scampered off, Minjun stood there, feeling a wave of anxiety wash over him. If someone caught him out here, it could trigger a full-blown emergency. His nerves were about to get a further workout as Sergeant Lee Seung-ho approached, demanding to know what Minjun was doing out back. Caught off guard, Minjun fumbled for an excuse. He turned around slowly and muttered, "I haven't had a drink in a while, so I needed some fresh air after the beer." Lee Seung-ho raised an eyebrow, asking if Minjun had a low tolerance. Minjun winced inwardly. Dark mages are pretty much immune to drunkenness. No matter the substance, alcohol, anesthesia, poison, or anything else, a dark mage's body instantly detoxifies and nullifies the effects. Admitting that would be a dead giveaway. Sergeant Lee gave Minjun a hearty congratulations on his advancement, and Minjun thanked him for the celebration and the beer. However, the sergeant warned him not to get too comfy or cocky with his new rank. "Keep up the good work," Lee advised. Minjun nodded, determined to live up to the sergeant's expectations. Lee Seung-ho left him to enjoy the night air but reminded him not to linger too long. The squad was going to finish the beer without him. As the sergeant walked away, Minjun exhaled in relief. He knew he needed to be even more cautious to avoid arousing suspicion. For now, though, he took in the serene moonlight, its radiance casting a calming glow over the HQ. The next morning dawned, brightening the HQ and ushering in a new day of discussions. The captain and commander pored over the scores from the advancement exams, and it was clear that Minjun was a force to be reckoned with. The commander had initially considered a drastic measure for those who didn't perform well, but Minjun's perfect score was a game-changer. The captain pointed out that Minjun had set a new record by clearing the monster handling test in just 4 seconds. The commander recalled how Choi Soon-beam from the training center had been raving about Minjun. Now it made sense. Minjun had not only exceeded every expectation but also raised the bar for the entire Hunter Corps. The commander reminded the captain that Minjun was also the one who single-handedly took down the middle bats at the old reserve. The captain was well aware Minjun had been the first to charge into battle, showing a level of bravery and initiative unmatched by his peers. The commander was thoroughly impressed by Minjun's rapid rise to corporal in under a month, and his exceptional performance. He had no doubt Minjun would soon become a standout figure in the Hunter Corps, but there was a nagging thought: once the entire Hunter Corps took notice, Minjun would be under intense scrutiny. The captain asked if the commander was referring to the Hunter's Special Forces Brigade, and whether he truly trusted Minjun with such a significant responsibility. The commander, confident as ever, assured the captain that Minjun was more than capable. Having seen countless hunters, he knew that those who joined the Special Forces Brigade were destined to become Hunter Corps legends. And he was certain that Minjun was on the verge of becoming the next legend. Cut to a desert landscape with towering sand dunes and rocky cliffs shrouded in a foggy haze. Amidst this arid arena, a soldier clad in battle gear navigates the sandy expanse. Suddenly, reptilian monsters slither out from one side, while rock golems emerge from the other. Brute-like orcs and mischievous goblins join the fray, surrounding the lone soldier. The monsters roar and snarl, trying to intimidate him. But this soldier, unflinching, is none other than Minjun. With a confident smile, he surveys his opponents and asks, "So, you've all finally gathered in one place just for me." He then casually bonks his own helmet with his spiked baseball bat, ready for the showdown. The scene shifts to a hunter guzzling a grape-flavored energy drink straight from the bottle, clearly trying to fend off the remnants of last night's revelry. Dongjin, who looks like he's been run over by a freight train of hangover, stares at the bottle with a mix of regret and desperation. Minjun, in contrast, strolls into the room looking as fresh as a daisy. While Dongjin and his buddy are wallowing in their nausea, Minjun's pristine appearance catches their attention. Ponytail guy, barely able to keep his eyes open, asks Minjun if he's feeling alright. Minjun cheerfully responds that he's perfectly fine, which leaves Ponytail slack-jawed. "You drank like a fish last night," Ponytail exclaims. Minjun's stamina or lack thereof continues to baffle him. However, Minjun's attention quickly shifts as Sergeant Lee enters, sporting a towel around his neck and looking like he just ran a marathon. Ponytail, still in a daze, asks if Sergeant Lee is okay. Sergeant Lee, dripping with sweat but grinning, explains that he's fine. He's just been sweating out the alcohol and detoxifying his body. Minjun, meanwhile, has a brief fruity moment where he admires Sergeant Lee's soldierly physique. Though let's not ship this, Minjun's heart belongs to Lumi, the Nepo baby. Sergeant Lee inquires if Minjun has checked out the gym yet. Minjun shakes his head, not having had the chance. "Well, now that you're a corporal, you can use it as much as you want," Sergeant Lee says. Minjun responds with an enthusiastic, "Yes." As Sergeant Lee heads out, he pauses and looks back at Minjun. "Oh, and don't forget to try out the VR device for your squad. It's top-notch." Minjun's ears perk up at the mention of VR. His excitement skyrockets at the prospect of exploring the Hunter Corps' VR room he's heard so much about. Cut to Minjun standing outside gym number 2, where the VR device is housed. He's practically bouncing with anticipation, ready to dive into a new world. He grips the doorknob, turns it, and steps into what feels like the gateway to a technological wonderland. The room is an awe-inspiring mix of futuristic tech and interactive possibilities. Minjun looks around in wonder, though it's just a room, so the realism might be a bit confusing. But hey, he's excited. He heads straight for the control panel, eager to start exploring. After a bit of fumbling with the settings, he finally begins to navigate through the various scenarios. His curiosity is palpable as he prepares to dive into the VR experience. Minjun's eyes lit up as he saw the selection of monsters in the VR system: hounds, monster rats, goblins, and orcs. Without a second thought, he selected orcs. But why stop there? He decided to go big or go home. With a mischievous grin, he smashed the plus icon repeatedly, adding more and more orcs to the scenario until he hit the maximum of 30. It wasn't quite the Dynasty Warriors scale he'd envisioned, but it would do. Next up was weapon selection. Minjun's excitement was palpable as he chose his gear. He grabbed the VR headset and controllers, and as he put on the headset, the room around him transformed from a regular training space into a desert battlefield. Minjun found himself in full battle armor, wielding a baseball bat with nails protruding from the top. The countdown began, and orcs started materializing in front of him. As the 0 mark hit, the orcs roared and stomped, charging at him with fury. Minjun's anticipation was through the roof. He took a moment to appreciate how realistic the VR setup was. With a series of powerful swings, he began to knock the orcs around, their skulls cracking open with satisfying crunches as they flew through the air. However, even with the realistic combat and gratifying impacts, Minjun felt something was missing. So, he cooked up a devious plan. He loaded the VR machine with 30 goblins, 30 orcs, 30 stone golems, and 30 lizardmen, pushing the system to its limits. The virtual world was soon flooded with monsters of every kind. Facing this overwhelming army, Minjun was ready for a real challenge. As the countdown ended, the monsters launched a coordinated assault. Minjun leapt into action, calling the attacking hordes cuties he was about to obliterate. His first strike shattered an orc skull, sending blood and orc fragments flying. He then turned his attention to a stone golem, smashing it to pieces as the orc's blood still coated his bat. The lizardmen and goblins fared no better. Minjun dismantled them with ruthless efficiency. He dodged a goblin's attack, then countered with a crushing blow that turned the goblin into a puddle of pixels. The other monsters, left in awe of Minjun's sheer strength, were no match for him. The battle raged on for several minutes, but the outcome was inevitable. The final lizardman met a brutal end, hitting the ground with a thud as Minjun stood victorious amid a sea of fallen enemies. He tapped his helmet to exit the VR experience, the simulation winding down as he removed the headset. With a grin from ear to ear, Minjun declared, "That was insanely fun. This is definitely the best thing since Dungeon Power Fighter." His excitement was off the charts, and he couldn't wait for his next VR adventure. As Minjun finished his VR session, a notification window popped up, announcing a new skill, basic blunt weapon handling. His eyes widened in surprise and delight as he reviewed the details. His proficiency with blunt weapons had noticeably improved, and he marveled at how effortlessly he could gain new skills. This was a game changer. He realized he didn't need to dive into dungeons anymore. The gym was his new training ground. Exiting the VR room with a sense of accomplishment, Minjun was already planning his next weapon experiments. However, his attention was abruptly diverted when Dongjin approached, looking frazzled and anxious. Minjun asked what was wrong, and Dongjin nervously pointed at the board next to the VR room door. Minjun's confusion turned to shock as he read the record, a staggering tally of monsters he had defeated in the second simulation. The sheer scale of his accomplishment was unprecedented, and word was bound to spread. Dongjin, visibly shaken, asked if Minjun had really defeated all those monsters. Minjun, seeing an opportunity to handle the situation while easing Dongjin's fears, suggested they have a chat in the gym. Dongjin, bewildered and apprehensive, questioned why he wasn't getting an explanation. Minjun's response was a cold, commanding look as he announced that Dongjin would be training. He pushed Dongjin into the gym, despite Dongjin's protests about his hangover, assuring him he'd feel better after a good workout. The door slammed shut behind them, and the terror of the training session was left to the imagination. Elsewhere, a soldier passing by the gym saw the record on the board and was floored by the sheer number, 120 monsters defeated. The soldier, presumably a corporal, was stunned by Minjun's feat and knew this news would spread like wildfire. The big question now was how this revelation would impact Minjun's life. The scene shifted to a snowy day at the base. Corporal Kim stepped out of the command building, his face a mix of awe and amazement, possibly having witnessed something extraordinary. Returning to the barracks, he found fellow soldiers lounging in the locker room. A nervous private informed Corporal Kim that everyone had gone to fetch snow removal equipment and that Minjun would be at the gym until scheduled activities began. However, the private inadvertently referred to Kim Minjun as the corporal, a slip that could have led to punishment. Surprisingly, Corporal Kim, now enlightened, showed no signs of jealousy or anger. He calmly instructed the private to find Minjun and let him know that the platoon commander was looking for him. The private, eager to avoid further trouble, hurried off. Back in the locker room, the remaining soldiers were engaged in a ridiculous bet about Minjun's promotion timeline. They even invited Corporal Kim to join. The bet involved wagering their entire monthly salary on how long it would take for Minjun to become a sergeant. The ponytail guy had bet that Minjun would rank up in 6 months, a prediction that the purple-haired soldier found amusing, but the ponytail guy remained confident. Intrigued, Corporal Kim decided to join in. When the ponytail guy saw Corporal Kim's bet, he was stunned to see that Kim had wagered Minjun would become a sergeant within a single month. The ponytail guy protested, worried about losing his salary, but Corporal Kim, Unfazed, simply waved and left. His confidence left the others in awe, with the ponytail guy remarking how even Corporal Kim seemed crazier than he was. Fast forward to the gym, where oddly colored dumbbells and weighted bars are meticulously organized, with a massive sign declaring that using the redstone equipment without a spotter is strictly forbidden. The peculiar hue of the gear is explained, but Minjun, he's lifting the heaviest redstone bar solo for his squats because, let's face it, he doesn't need a spotter. As he rises with the bar, His ripped physique, typically concealed under casual attire, is revealed in all its glory. After knocking out a few sets of dumbbell curls, Minjun sets down the hefty redstone weights to admire his gains. Despite the special gear aiding his bulk-up journey, his stats haven't skyrocketed. He's wistful for the days in Isgard, where he could level up his skills and become an overpowered warrior. In this world, he's convinced he'd be a Super Saiyan if only he could level up faster. For now, he endures the slow grind of stat increases. Just then, a notification window pops up with a surprise. A new skill named Power has been unlocked, boosting his strength stat by 5 points. Initially, it seems like a basic and somewhat lame skill, but Minjun is thrilled to have something new, knowing he can level it up over time. Meanwhile, a private arrives at the door, salutes the corporal with a mix of stiffness and nerves, and informs him that the platoon commander is looking for him. High on the excitement of unlocking a new skill, Minjun thanks the private with twinkling eyes and agrees to see the commander. The private is left bewildered by Minjun's odd expression, while Minjun cheerfully gets dressed. The private can't help but wonder if everyone on base has secretly lost their marbles. Next stop, the administrative office in the main building. Minjun strides in, salutes the platoon commander, and confirms his presence. The commander, brimming with excitement, waves him over eagerly. As Minjun approaches, the commander rises, assuring him that there's nothing serious to discuss and suggesting they continue the conversation in the counseling office. En route to the counseling office, the commander inquires about Minjun's life as a corporal, noting it's been a week since his promotion. Minjun shares that he's enjoying it immensely and congratulates the commander on his own advancement. The commander, pleased, attributes his promotion to Minjun's handling of the middle bed incident. Once seated, the commander expresses his gratitude to Minjun for his contributions and hands him a file, explaining that it's from the battalion commander in recognition of Minjun's achievements and perfect score on the advancement exam. Inside the file is an award of excellence for Minjun. The commander apologizes for the casual presentation but assures Minjun that this award is a monumental milestone in his military career. Minjun's ears perk up, and he inquires if such achievements can earn him further exceptions. The commander isn't certain but mentions that few have received this award as early as Minjun, and even fewer have collected multiple awards of excellence. Undeterred, Minjun asks if gathering 10 of these awards could fast-track him to the next rank. The commander falls silent, pondering if Minjun thinks these awards are handed out like Amazon coupon codes. Meanwhile, Minjun daydreams about all the extra gaming time he could enjoy with such achievements. A few days have passed, and now we're standing in front of an underpass with a dungeon gate wide open. The commanders are briefing their units about their mission. The platoon commander announces that their squad is tasked with clearing this dungeon. Familiar faces abound as he reassures everyone that if they perform their duties as trained, they'll walk out unscathed. He also reminds them that they should already be familiar with this type of dungeon. Meanwhile, Sergeant First Class Kim Minji drops a crate of supplies. The platoon collectively grimaces at the sight, and for good reason. The platoon commander pulls out a face mask from the crate, revealing the dungeon's charming name, the Monster Rat Nest, basically the world's worst sewer tour. Inside the sewer dungeon, the units trudge through toxic, murky waters. At the back are our trio: Corporal Kim Minjun, Corporal Ponytail, and Private First Class Lee Dongjin. As they gripe about the stench, we see Sergeant Lee and 2nd Platoon Commander Kim Chalman leading the way, with Sergeant First Class Kim Minji and the privates bringing up the rear. Here's the lowdown on this place. The Monster Rat Nest Dungeon, fondly known as the sewers by the Hunter Corps, isn't classified as highly dangerous. However, it spawns over 200 monster rats, and the cramped tunnels make firearms useless, turning it into a tricky challenge. Sergeant Lee raises his fist, signaling the platoon commander that they're approaching a danger zone. The commander passes the warning to Lee Dongjin and the others. The group finds themselves in a relatively open area within the dungeon. Sergeant Lee points out that this clearing has only 2 entrances, suggesting they lure the monsters here for a decisive battle. From the mini-map, we see the platoon entering from the left, with the only other entrance directly opposite. The platoon commander agrees with Sergeant Lee's plan and signals the units to start preparing the bait. An aerial view shows the platoon as someone brings the bait crate to the commander. The private delivering the crate is from the same platoon. The stench from the closed box alone makes Corporal Ponytail gag. The dungeon's foul odor, combined with the special gas masks from the hunter corps, creates an environment where the hunters can't perform at their best. As the platoon commander opens the crate, an ominous and disgusting stench wafts out. The bait turns out to be a rotting banana, smelling worse than your uncle's farts at family gatherings. The bait is so vile that the author had to censor it for your viewing pleasure. Kim Minjun and Corporal Ponytail recoil at the sight. Ponytail quips that no wonder the rat monsters reek if they're eating stuff like this. Nonetheless, on the commander's orders, the units begin setting the bait to lure out the monsters. The stage is set for a clash with the sewer-dwelling monstrosities. The commander steps forward to plant the baits in every corner of the cave, but something odd catches his eye. As he moves towards a corner, his foot brushes against a sinister pile of bones. He recoils in shock, but the real confusion hits when he sees the entire floor covered in bones that unmistakably belong to the monster rats they came here to exterminate. As the platoon commander bends down to inspect, Purple Hair shouts a warning. A swarm of monster rats is charging in from the second entrance. Sensing the imminent battle, the commander quickly shifts priorities, ordering all units to take their positions. The shield unit steps forward in unison to protect the attack unit from any ambush. Sergeant First Class Kim Minji leads the shield unit, while the platoon commander directs the attacking hunters ready to face the oncoming enemies. Corporal Ponytail and Purple Hair start betting on who will kill the most monsters, showcasing their betting addiction. Sergeant Lee cautions them to stay focused, but Ponytail ignores the warning and invites him to join the bet. This oddly brings a smile to Sergeant Lee's face, as the playful banter lightens the tense mood. Meanwhile, Minjun remains laser-focused on the task ahead. The rotting bananas have worked better than expected, as monster rats pour out in hordes from the cave's other end. The platoon commander draws his sword and commands all units to hold the defense line and not break formation. This means engaging the monsters while maintaining their positions. As the rats leap with their gnarly claws, Minjun feels a thrill of excitement. Purple Hair decapitates a monster rat with a single strike, while Ponytail takes down 3 at once with his dual-wielding weapons. Sergeant Lee, always a cut above, effortlessly incapacitates his share of monsters with his iron knuckles. Minjun, observing from the sidelines, probably ranks his comrades in a mental tier list. Two more standouts are the sergeants of the 2nd platoon, Sergeant Kim Jeongki with his warhammer and Sergeant Chody Wook, a master of dual-wielding katanas. Even the once pathetic corporal is handling several monsters at once. As Minjun watches the corporal who once bullied him, he's ambushed by 3 skeevers. However, these puny monsters aren't worth his full attention. Without even looking, Minjun clubs the rats right in their faces, decapitating all 3 with a single, swift swing. Some monster rats manage to slip past the fighting soldiers, but the last line of defense stands ready, Sergeant First Class Kim Minji and the platoon commander himself. With them standing guard, no monster will touch the shield unit. Minjun continues his whack-a-mole game with the monsters, noting the impressive area coverage by the top-ranking officers of the platoon. He finally focuses on another standout, Lee Dongjin. Dongjin's cross-patterned swordsmanship is evident as he slices through the rats. Minjun, proud of his friend's progress, smiles. Sergeant Lee, also smiling from the back, recognizes Dongjin's potential. When a call for extra hands comes, Dongjin is the first to respond, while Corporal Purple Hair are still busy slicing up rats. After downing a monster, Corporal glances at Minjun and Dongjin, possibly wondering if Minjun can make him stronger too. But this isn't the time for daydreaming. He wipes his sword clean of blood and readies for the remaining enemies. Just as the rat corpses pile up, the shield unit spots something going horribly wrong at the rear. A fresh horde of monster rats is charging in from the rear entrance, which the shield unit was supposed to cover. The commander hears the signal from the privates and shouts a warning, "Get ready for monster wave number 2. He springs into action, commanding the 1st and 4th squads to handle the rear while ordering the privates to fall back, shields up, and avoid solo engagements. The 4th Squad's corporals quickly arrive to help, diving into the rat massacre with their various melee weapons. After a flurry of slicing and dicing, the soldiers start to relax as the enemies are nearly wiped out. However, Minjun senses something off. A surge of demonic energy in the air grabs his attention. The gas masks had masked it before, but now it's unmistakable. The source, a mound under Corpor's feet. Just as Minjun realizes this, the mound begins to crumble. He shouts a warning, but it's too late. As Corporal looks down, the ground erupts in a massive column of dust and debris, sending soldiers flying. The platoon commander almost loses his cool when he sees the enormous mutated rat emerging. This irregular monster has the classic rat teeth, huge side fangs, and an extra pair of glowing, ominous purple eyes. The commander deduces that the earlier rat bones were the result of this monster feeding on others. But no time for deductions. Now the monstrous rat is eyeing Corporal, who's too petrified to move. The commander, paralyzed with fear, can only shout at Corporal to get up and run. But the Corporal is too terrified, his legs useless. The monster swings its razor-sharp claws at him. Thinking his end is near, the Corporal tries to shield himself one last time. You'd expect Minjun to save the day, but it's Lee Dongjin who leaps into action first, deflecting the monster's blow, though his weapon is knocked away. Dongjin grabs the Corporal's shoulder, urging him to get up and flee. The furious monster shrieks, ready to strike again. While the platoon commander shouts in fear, Minjun finally springs into action. With his shield in hand, he leaps high, aiming to mount the monster's back. As the beast corners its prey, Minjun prepares for a devastating shield bash. Noticing the monster's defocused eyes and fearless actions, he confirms it's possessed by demonic energy. Minjun transforms into a human comet, slamming the monster's face into the ground. Lee Dongjin and Corporal jump back, shielding their eyes from the debris. Emerging from the dust, Minjun gives Dongjin a thumbs up for his valiant effort. Dongjin smiles in relief, knowing his friend will handle the rest. He takes the Corporal and rushes back to the defense line, where the platoon commander is shouting for Minjun to retreat, and Kim Minji orders the remaining corporals to form up. Minjun, however, faces the irregular monster, which is back on its feet, baring its fangs. It unleashes an attack filled with demonic energy, sending a shock wave of purple energy in all directions. The wave causes stalactites to break and fall, creating a rain of rocks around the platoon commander. The dust kicked up by the falling rocks acts as a smoke screen, allowing Minjun to thank the monster for the convenient cover. The gigantic rat goes for another claw attack, almost as if it's ripping through the fabric of reality itself. However, its opponent is a literal god among men. Minjun's eyes glint with his own brand of demonic energy, allowing him to go all out now that the monster has provided a convenient smoke screen. In a heartbeat, he rockets forward like a bullet, striking the monster rat in the leg and shattering it completely. He follows up with a shield rush, bashing the monster with such immense force that it's knocked back at supersonic speed. But Minjun isn't done yet. He tosses aside his shield and dashes towards the monster to deliver the finishing blows. He unleashes a barrage of superhuman punches, leaving the monster screeching in agony. After a few seconds, he pauses to inspect the now lifeless creature. Its muscles are caved in, pieces of its ears are missing, and nearly all its teeth are gone. Satisfied, Minjun begins harvesting the demonic energy from the corpse. The energy leaves the rat in waves, gathering in his hand as a cackling ball and fueling him with even more power. As the remaining energy gets sucked out, the rat's eyes lose their purple glow. A notification window pops up, informing Minjun that his demonic energy stat has increased by 1 level. Minjun didn't expect the creature to hold so much demonic energy, so as a gesture of politeness, he takes out his metal bat and thanks the monster rat for its loot before proceeding to beat it to a pulp. Our boy will keep getting stronger, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop him. But he wonders if anyone witnessed his power. The fight inside the sewer dungeon is over, and the scene shifts outside to the base where the army is guarding the entrance. The boys from the 2nd platoon are exhausted, catching their breaths on the road before heading home. Purple Hair managed to pull ahead of Ponytail in their bet and keeps telling him to admit defeat. Ponytail, though begrudgingly accepting the loss, knows these two will bet on something again. Meanwhile, the platoon commander is on the phone with HQ, providing a dramatic update. He details the irregular monster attack and reassures them that all squads have made it out safely. Glancing at Minjun, he adds that the monster was defeated by a member of his platoon. Our hero, busy trying to scrub the stink off his clothes, looks like he's regretting his decision as much as someone who just scratched an itch in a very awkward place. As the commander requests reinforcements, Minjun continues to futilely dust off the stink from his uniform. Ponytail approaches with a grumble, bemoaning the bizarre situations they always seem to face on the front lines. He sits down and thanks Minjun for saving everyone in the dungeon, admitting he was paralyzed with fear when he saw the irregular monster. Minjun, ever the gentleman, responds that he was merely doing his duty and apologizes for taking action without orders. Ponytail, reflecting on the monstrosity, acknowledges that orders wouldn't have mattered in such a crisis. He thanks Minjun again for his heroic actions that saved Corporal and Dongjin. Concerned, he asks if Minjun is alright and if he was hurt. Minjun nods, appreciating Ponytail's concern, though his gratitude is subtly masked by his focus on not smelling like a sewer. The platoon commander, growing more curious, asks Minjun the same question, his suspicion about Minjun's abilities growing. Minjun, maintaining his composure, assures him he's fine with no scratches. Ponytail, in disbelief, wonders if Minjun is even human. The commander sighs and orders Minjun to meet him in his office later for a detailed discussion. At the administrative office, Minjun sits across from the commander, who demands a detailed report on how he defeated the monster. Minjun hesitates, unsure what to write beyond the fact that he used his fists when his shield didn't work. The commander, noting Minjun's hesitation, directly asks if he defeated the monster with his bare hands. Minjun, caught in the act, reluctantly admits it. The commander is taken aback by Minjun's strength and agility stats, realizing they far surpass those of an average sergeant. He muses that with such exceptional stats, Minjun could have been in the Hunter Military Academy but recalls Minjun's high school dropout status. He advises Minjun to consider taking the GED tests to advance his career, but Minjun, who detests studying, prefers to rank up through achievements. The commander, understanding Minjun's stance, offers support if he changes his mind about the GED. Pleased to have such a reliable individual under his command, the commander dismisses Minjun to get some rest. Before Minjun leaves, the commander thanks him for his bravery, acknowledging that his actions likely saved the platoon. Minjun humbly responds that he only did what was necessary and exits the office. In the hallway, Minjun encounters Lee Dongjin and Corporal, who is still bandaged. The Corporal, eager to join Dongjin's special training under Minjun's guidance, nervously explains how he learned about it and why he wants to join despite his injuries. The Corporal admits he believes Dongjin's rapid growth must be due to Minjun's training and wishes to improve similarly. Minjun, unimpressed and slightly perplexed, questions how the Corporal found out and why he's so keen to join, given his current state. He tries to be more honest, but his pride as the former bully won't let him. The dude can't even look our hero in the eyes when he says that he wants to join their training to become stronger. It's taking him a lot of courage to even voice these words, but at least his heart is in the right place. Now, we tend to forget because Minjun has been acting nice most of the time, but our hero is a natural-born bully. Even right now, he's having a really hard time holding back his amusement. In the end, we can see his inner devil stand behind him as he tells the Corporal that he would never accept him so easily. With a wicked smile on his face, he actually calls the Corporal by his full name, Kim Gwangsik, and lets him know that there is a certain order to doing such things. Gwangsik knows exactly what Minjun wants, but he's too embarrassed to say the words. After a moment, the apologetic Corporal finally decides to swallow his pride for the sake of getting stronger. He bows down in front of Dongjin, aggressively thanking him for saving him in the dungeon and apologizing for bullying him previously. Of course, Our boy couldn't be happier to see this, but Dongjin is starting to get nervous because he is a junior. The corporal finally becomes fully sincere and apologizes once again for all his previous actions. He states that he is serious about training alongside Dongjin and reveals that he would like to become a non-commissioned officer due to some personal circumstances. Since Dongjin is such a sympathizing homie, he turns to Minjun, telling him that he doesn't mind if the corporal joins them in their training. But of course, Minjun doesn't share the same feelings. He stays silent for a while, which starts to confuse Dongjin, and then he finally opens his mouth in an ominous fashion. He replies that he's not fine with taking in the corporal, which comes as a surprise to both men. Gwangsik feels dejected, but he understands that Minjun wouldn't be comfortable around him due to his past actions. So he just thanks the two for saving his life in the dungeon and promises to never bother them again. He then turns around to leave with slumped shoulders. The dude looks like he will never recover from his emotional damage. But then our hero tells him that he can take him in, but only on one condition. That perks up the ears of the corporal as he immediately turns his head to hear what Minjun has to say. But in all honesty, no one would have expected him to say the word pigeon. Of course, a big question mark dangles on the corporal's face as he has no idea what Minjun means by pigeon. But the misunderstanding soon gets cleared when our hero makes the face of a divorced auntie whose only hobby is to ruin others' marriages and tells the corporal that he will accept him if he acts like a pigeon for an entire day. Gwangsik's head starts boiling with rage when he hears that, but Minjun tells him that he would never accept him if he doesn't comply. So as enraged and angry as he is, the corporal starts puckering up his lips. Every single vein on his head starts to pop out. His eyes start to twitch, and all of his teeth grind against each other as he starts to slowly coo like a pigeon. The scene then switches to a beautiful night, a fantasy-like cathedral, and to full moons in the starry sky. It's pretty clear that we're now in the world of Isgard. A creaky trolley is being pushed around by a muscular man in a Spartan helmet. The object on the trolley is covered in a cloth. He stops the trolley just before reaching a woman in white clothes, and when the woman thanks the muscular Spartan for his good work, we get a proper look at her familiar back. This woman is none other than the saintess we haven't seen since episode 1. The Spartan man just stares silently at the saintess, his battle-hardened scars clearly visible under the moonlight. The saintess turns around, expecting to hear a response from the Spartan warrior, but when he says nothing, she asks him directly if there's something he wishes to say to her. Finally, the warrior speaks. He asks the saintess how long she's planning to keep doing this. Hearing that, she steps forward in his direction, but instead of standing in front of him, she walks past him towards the trolley that he brought here. Her face is now fully visible under the bright light of the moon, her features holy and beautiful as one would expect from a person of such charisma. As she slides the curtain on the package to take a look inside, I think I speak for everyone when I say that we can all appreciate this elegant view. What peeks from behind the curtain are the purple glowing eyes of a beast whose angry growls can audibly be heard by the saintess. She lets go of the curtain to conceal the monstrosity and lets out a small exhale of satisfaction. The concerned warrior once again tries to call out to the saintess, as if trying to convince her that she should reconsider her actions. But then the holy maiden holds her left hand in front with her palm open, and under her command, a massive purple magic circle opens up in the middle of the room, the same magic circle that was once used to transport Kim Minjun back to Earth. The circle draws the abundant magic energy from the surrounding air, and the saintess speaks to the Spartan warrior once again. She says that she's sending another gift to the man who decided to leave them, but her next sentence makes the warrior reel back in surprise. Much like Minjun, this saintess knows how to change her expressions fast, and with the devil riding her shoulder, she proudly claims that there's no such thing as too much anger when it comes to revenge. So, I guess now we know why our boy kept running into irregular monsters inside every dungeon. Back on Earth, our scene opens with a soldier frantically digging away with a shovel. Surprise! Surprise, it's none other than the sergeant from the 2nd platoon, and right beside him is none other than Purple Hair. Fresh off a treacherous dungeon, it looks like the army's idea of a warm welcome is making them break a sweat erecting a new camp. When the sergeant finally collapses in a heap, looking like he's auditioning for a damsel in distress role. Purple Hair chimes in with a brilliant observation. Hey, do you think all these new camps actually do anything in the grand monster fighting scheme of things? As they glance over at their fellow diggers, even the orange-haired sergeant seems to question the camp's practical value. But, as soldiers, their only job is to follow orders, not to question the functionality of their manual labor. Just then, a military vehicle pulls up, and you can practically see the sergeant and Purple Hair's jaws hitting the floor. Their expressions say all they're in for even more work. And, indeed, the truck delivers a load of mysterious material called stetl. Cue the collective groan from the soldiers as they realize it's time to haul more cubes. Kim Minjun and his student are also in the trenches, transporting the stetl cubes to their new homes. Enter the newest squad member, Corporal Wang Shik, who's clearly struggling under the weight of a single cube. Seizing his moment to shine, he starts explaining why this material is called stetl. Well, folks, he begins, stetl is actually a nickname we soldiers gave it because we're still debating whether it's stone or metal. This seemingly innocent cube is ridiculously heavy and tough, which is exactly why the military uses it for building camps in the middle of nowhere. So there you have it, stetl, making soldiers question their life choices one cube at a time. As Wang Shik is about to delve into the mysteries of stetl, he spots Minjun nonchalantly carrying two of the cubes on his shoulders like they're made of foam. Watching Minjun casually balance one cube on his right shoulder and the other on his left, Wang Shik is left slack-jawed. But then again, this is Minjun we're talking about. When it comes to him, anything seems possible. Realizing he might never truly understand his extraordinary friend, Wang Shik shrugs it off and mutters to himself that he was just trying to explain a few things in case anyone was curious. Spoiler alert, I have a feeling he'll be explaining a lot more in the future. The soldiers continue their grueling work, each shipping in to transport the special stetl material to the camp. Minjun's heroics include carrying up to 4 cubes at once, which definitely leaves everyone's jaws on the floor. But hey, after witnessing Minjun's feats, this is just another day at the office. When the truck is finally emptied, Kim Minji grants everyone a 10-minute break, and the weary soldiers slump down by the road. But the rest doesn't last long. Kim Minji pulls the platoon commander aside and reports an alarming tidbit: a Tinkan dungeon has popped up in their area. Cue the collective panic hits as if someone announced the end of the world. The soldiers, suddenly resembling a herd of frantic cats, demand to confirm this news and beg Kim Minji to let them skip the next raid. Their desperation is palpable, and they even start clinging to Kim Minji as if he's their last hope. Minjun, watching this chaos unfold, is left puzzled about the fuss. Wang Shik, ever the know-it-all, notices Minjun's confusion and, with a smirk, gears up for another one of his infamous explanations. As the camera zooms in on Wang Shik's face, his trademark chuckle confirms what we all suspected: he's about to deliver a monologue. Alright, listen up. Wang Shik begins with his usual flair. Tinkan dungeons are a special breed. Hunters call them that for a reason. First off, these dungeons are huge. Secondly, they're teeming with monsters more than your average dungeon. Thirdly, and this is the kicker, they don't have bosses or high-risk monsters. So, when a dungeon meets these criteria, it's dubbed a Tinkan dungeon. They're ideal for hunters to get some real battle experience, which is why they're often used for divisional training. There's even a fancy name for it: hunter field maneuvers. Minjun listens, intrigued but still somewhat puzzled by Wang Shik's constant need to explain things. Wang Shik, clearly embracing his role as the resident explainer, sidles up and whispers that he just felt like sharing because someone might be curious. The life of an explanation character in man was never a dull moment. As Minjun ponders the importance of hunter field maneuvers, he glances at the frantic sergeants still begging Kim Minji to save them from the impending chaos. If their desperation is anything to go by, maybe Minjun can skip the training and still come out on top. Just as Minji is on the verge of losing his patience with the whining soldiers, the platoon commander interjects with a dose of reality. "You don't have the luxury of skipping this training," he says. "Besides, it's the perfect chance for all of you to rack up some accomplishments." The word accomplishments lights up Minjun's eyes like a kid in a candy store. He starts imagining the piles of awards and accolades he could collect by participating in these trainings. His excitement skyrockets, and he's practically glowing with joy, convinced that joining the front lines was the best decision ever. But just as Minjun is basking in his newfound optimism, he spots a creepy face peeking out from his shadow. His joy vanishes faster than a magician's rabbit. "What the hell are you doing here, Tiny?" he demands of his tiny summon, which responds with an annoyingly cute smile. In an attempt to squash the cuteness, Minjun steps on Tiny, who lets out a little squeak. Minjun quickly squats over the little pest to hide it from view, casting a wary glance around to see if anyone's noticed. Thankfully, the other soldiers are still too busy moaning about their fate to pay any attention. With a sigh of relief, Minjun gently places his hand on the shadow, inquiring about Tiny's unexpected visit. Thanks to his shadow summons powers, a stream of information floods into his mind. He sees two Hunter Corps executives strolling down a hallway. One, a major by the look of her cap, is discussing a request for reinforcements due to an irregular monster sighting. She explains that the request came from the investigative team regarding a new dungeon that popped up in Yongo. The unnamed male executive, however, is unimpressed. "Forget the new dungeon," he says. "Let the regular soldiers deal with it. We're focusing our forces on the dungeons in our own area." The major, looking resigned, nods and accepts the orders. With that, the information stream ends, and Minjun returns to reality. He looks down at Tiny, who's still adorably squirming. Despite the cuteness, Minjun remains unyielding and steps on him again with a smirk. "Guess it's time for a day off," he says to himself, looking forward to a break from the chaos. As Minjun prepares for a well-deserved break, we're left with a lot to ponder. What's really going on in Yongo, and how will Minjun's next adventure unfold? If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more action-packed content. Don't forget to ring the bell icon so you never miss an update. And hey, we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below with your theories on the mysterious dungeon and what you think Minjun's next move should be. Stay tuned, because things are about to get even more intense. Until next time, keep your shadows close and your friends closer. See you soon.